Greetings and salutations. Welcome to DC What If. We are thrilled to present today's story. What if Superman was sent to the Invincible universe? If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1, The Last Son. The first thing Clark Kent noticed when he woke up that morning was the sound of his mother's heartbeat downstairs. Not that unusual, except they lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere, and his bedroom was on the second floor. He'd been noticing things like that more and more lately. The whispered conversations between his parents when they thought he couldn't hear. The way he could see through walls if he squinted just right. The fact that when he tripped and fell last week, he left a small crater in the dirt. Clark stared at his ceiling, listening to the birds singing nearly a mile away. Something was definitely wrong with him, or maybe, something was finally going right. Clark. Breakfast. His mom's voice called up, and he was downstairs before she finished saying his name. Martha Kent nearly dropped her spatula. Goodness, I didn't even hear you on the stairs. Sorry, Clark mumbled, sliding into his chair at the kitchen table. Guess I'm just hungry. His father Jonathan lowered his newspaper, giving Clark that look, the one that said they needed to talk, but not yet. Clark had seen that look a lot lately. Got plans for today, son? Jonathan asked casually, too casually. Clark shrugged. Just helping Lana with her science project later. Why? His parents exchanged that look again. The one that made Clark's stomach twist. After breakfast, Jonathan said finally, I think we should take a walk to the barn. The metal box looked completely ordinary, except it wasn't. Clark could feel it, something about the way light reflected off its surface, something about the weight when his father handed it to him. We've been waiting for the right time, Martha said, her hand on Clark's shoulder. We thought maybe when you turned 18, but with everything that's been happening lately. What's been happening? Clark asked, though he already knew. The strength. The speed. The senses. The feeling of being different. Open it, son, Jonathan said gently. Inside was something that looked like a large crystal, glowing with its own inner light, along with what appeared to be a small metallic object shaped like an S inside a diamond. What is this? Clark whispered, but some part of him already knew. You came to us in this, Jonathan said, gesturing to what Clark had always thought was just an old tarp covering junk in the corner. His father pulled it away to reveal a small craft, unlike anything Clark had ever seen. 17 years ago. During that meteor shower. Clark's mind raced. I'm not from here. You're our son, Martha said firmly, squeezing his hand. But yes, you came from somewhere else. Somewhere very far away. When Clark touched the crystal, it lit up brilliantly, projecting an image of a man in strange clothing with a familiar symbol on his chest. My son, the projection spoke. My name is Jor-El, and I was, your father. By the time you see this message, I will have been dead for many years. Clark sat on the roof of the Kent farmhouse that night, staring at the stars. One of those distant points of light had been Krypton. Had been, past tense. A world that no longer existed except in the memories stored in the crystals his birth father had sent with him. Kal-El. That was his name. His real name. The last son of Krypton. He held the small metal emblem in his palm, tracing the S shape that wasn't really an S at all, but the Kryptonian symbol for hope. Hope felt in short supply right now. Clark. His mother's voice called softly from below. You okay up there? He almost laughed. Was he okay? He'd just found out he was an alien refugee from an exploded planet. I'll be down in a bit, Mom, he called back. Don't stay up too late. School tomorrow. School. Homework. Normal things that suddenly seemed so strange. How was he supposed to care about algebra when he'd just discovered he was the last survivor of an advanced alien civilization? But as he listened to his mother's heartbeat retreat back into the house, steady and comforting, Clark realized something important. Krypton might have given him life and these strange abilities, but Earth, and more specifically, 2 Kansas farmers, had given him everything else. He was Clark Kent. And maybe, someday, he could also be something more. "You're not focusing," Lana Lang said, waving her hand in front of Clark's face. "Birth to Clark. The science fair is next week." They were sitting in her backyard, supposedly working on their project about solar energy. Clark had spent most of the afternoon staring at the sun, realizing for the first time that it didn't hurt his eyes at all. "Sorry," Clark said, blinking and looking back at their half-assembled solar panels. "Just distracted today." "You've been, just distracted, a lot lately," Lana said, tucking a strand of red hair behind her ear. "Everything okay at home?" Clark picked up one of the solar panels and connected it to the circuit board without even looking at the instructions. "Yeah, just, thinking about college applications and stuff." "Since when do you care about college? Last week you were talking about taking a year off to find yourself or whatever." Clark smiled despite himself. Lana had been his best friend since kindergarten. They'd dated briefly in sophomore year before deciding they worked better as friends. She knew him too well. Or thought she did. "People change," he said, then accidentally snapped the metal frame he was handling. "Oops." Lana stared. "How did you do that?" "Those frames are aluminum." Must have been a manufacturing defect," Clark said quickly. "Look, I should probably get going." "Farm chores." "Clark Kent, what is going on with you?" Lana stood up, hands on her hips. "You've been weird for months. And don't think I haven't noticed you suddenly not needing your glasses anymore." "I got contacts," he lied. "No, you didn't, because I asked your mom last week when I was over for dinner, and she looked confused." Clark sighed. "It's complicated, Lana. Try me." For a wild moment, Clark considered telling her everything. About the ship, about Krypton, about the strength and speed that kept increasing daily. But the memory of his father's warning stopped him. "People fear what they don't understand, Clark. And they'll want to control what they fear." "I've just got some stuff to figure out," he said finally. "I promise I'm okay." Lana didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Just remember, whatever it is, you don't have to deal with it alone." If only that were true, Clark thought. The truck skidded on the wet highway, hydroplaning across 3 lanes before smashing through the guardrail. Clark saw it happen in what felt like slow motion. He was walking home along the rural route when the sound of screeching tires caught his attention a half-mile away. He didn't think. He just moved. One moment he was standing on the roadside, the next, he was running faster than he ever had before, the world blurring around him. The truck was already airborne, beginning its fatal plunge toward the ravine below. Clark leaped, sailing through the air in defiance of gravity, catching the truck's rear bumper just as it cleared the edge. For a heartbeat, he hung suspended, the full weight of the vehicle pulling against his grip. Then he realized, he wasn't falling. He was flying. Hovering in midair, Clark pulled the truck back from the brink, carefully setting it on solid ground. Inside, the driver, a middle-aged man, sat frozen in shock, staring at Clark through the side mirror. "Are you okay?" Clark asked, approaching the driver's window. The man's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. You flew. You saved me. Who are you?" Clark stepped back, suddenly aware of what he'd done, what he'd revealed. "I'm just glad you're okay," he said, then turned and sped away before the man could say anything else. He ran all the way home, not slowing down even when he realized he was moving faster than any car on the highway. When he finally stopped in the cornfield behind the farm, he was barely breathing hard. He'd flown. Actually flown. Clark looked up at the darkening sky, then crouched and pushed off with all his strength. The ground fell away as he shot upward, sailing hundreds of feet into the air before he started to descend. On pure instinct, he willed himself to stay aloft, and to his amazement, he did. Hovering above his family's farm, Clark Kent laughed for the first time since discovering his alien origins. This was incredible. This was freedom. This was who he was meant to be. You did what? Jonathan Kent's face had gone pale. Clark sat at the kitchen table, still buzzing with excitement. I saved him, Dad. The truck was going over the edge, and I caught it. I flew. Someone saw you. It wasn't a question. The driver, but nothing. Jonathan ran a hand through his graying hair. Clark, we've talked about this. If people find out what you can do, they'll be afraid, Clark finished. I know. But Dad, I saved a man's life today. How can that be wrong? Martha placed a calming hand on her husband's arm. No one's saying saving lives is wrong, honey. We're just worried. About what? Clark stood up, frustration building. That people will discover I'm an alien. That the government will lock me up and experiment on me. Dad, I lifted a truck with one hand today. I'm not sure anyone could lock me up if I didn't let them. Jonathan's expression hardened. That kind of thinking is exactly what scares me, son. Power without humility is just tyranny. The words hit Clark like a physical blow. He sank back into his chair. I don't want to be a tyrant, he said quietly. I just want to help people. These abilities, they have to be for something. Why else would I have them? His parents exchanged a look, having one of their silent conversations. Your father and I have been talking, Martha said finally. About what comes after graduation. Clark looked up. And maybe it's time for you to figure out who Clark Kent is going to be, Jonathan said. Not just as our son, but as, whatever else you might become. Clark blinked. You're saying I should use my abilities? We're saying you need to make your own choices, Martha clarified. But whatever you decide, you need to be careful. The world isn't always kind to those who are different. Clark nodded slowly. I've been thinking about something. A disguise, maybe. A way to help people without everyone knowing it's me. What kind of disguise? Jonathan asked. Clark pulled the Kryptonian symbol from his pocket, the stylized S catching the light. I was thinking something with this. Something that honors where I came from, but also where I am now. Who I am now. Martha smiled. I might be able to help with that. I still know my way around a sewing machine. The costume was simple but striking, blue with red accents, the family crest of the House of L emblazoned on the chest. The red cape had been Martha's idea. If you're going to fly, she'd said with a wink, you might as well look dramatic doing it. Clark stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, barely recognizing himself. Without his glasses, with his hair styled differently, with the bold colors drawing attention away from his face, he looked like someone else. Someone stronger. What do you think? Martha asked, making final adjustments to the cape's attachment points. I think. Clark took a deep breath. I think it's perfect. A week after graduation, Clark Kent left Smallville. Officially, he was taking a gap year to travel before college. Unofficially, he was headed to Metropolis, a city big enough to get lost in, but with enough problems that someone with his abilities might make a real difference. His parents hugged him goodbye at the bus station, though all three knew he could have flown there faster than any bus. Remember who you are, Jonathan said gruffly, gripping Clark's shoulder. Both sides of you. I will, Dad. Clark hugged him one last time, careful of his strength. Martha pressed a small package into his hands. One last addition to your outfit, she said. For when you're ready. Later, alone in his small rented room in Metropolis, Clark opened the package to find a simple domino mask, designed to cover the area around his eyes. "Not much of a disguise," he muttered, trying it on and looking in the mirror. But combined with the costume and his altered posture and voice, it might just be enough. That night, a mugging was interrupted by a blur of red and blue. The would-be victim described her savior as some kind of flying man. The mugger, found suspended from a lamppost, was less complimentary. By the end of the week, all of Metropolis was talking about the mysterious flying hero who seemed to appear wherever trouble struck. Smartphone videos captured blurry images of a caped figure soaring between skyscrapers. Social media dubbed him the Blue Blur and Cape Guy. It was a reporter from the Daily Planet who finally gave him a proper name. Clark, working as a barista to pay his rent, nearly spilled coffee when he saw the headline on a customer's newspaper, "Superman saves train from disaster." Above the fold was a remarkably clear photo of him holding up a collapsing bridge as a passenger train crossed safely. The angle made the S on his chest prominent. Superman. It wasn't what he'd have chosen for himself, but as he listened to customers in the coffee shop talking excitedly about the new hero, Clark had to admit it had a certain ring to it. 3 months into his time in Metropolis, Superman had become a household name. Crime rates dropped. Citizens walked the streets with newfound confidence. The mayor presented him with a key to the city in a ceremony Superman attended briefly, hovering above the crowd, saying a few words of thanks before disappearing into the sky. Clark Kent remained anonymous, working his barista job, taking night classes at Metropolis Community College, keeping his head down. It was a strange double life, but he was making it work. Until the day the other alien arrived. Clark first noticed the anomaly while flying patrol, a sonic boom from the upper atmosphere, followed by what looked like a meteor streaking toward Earth. But his enhanced vision revealed it was no meteor. It was a ship, similar in design to the one that had brought him to Earth, but larger. He intercepted it high above the Atlantic Ocean, matching its descent speed. "Hello," he called out, not sure if anyone inside could hear him. "I mean you no harm." The ship slowed, then stopped, hovering in midair. A hatch opened, and a man emerged, a human-looking man with dark hair and a mustache, wearing a white and blue bodysuit. "Well," the man said, looking Superman up and down with an expression of mild surprise. "This is unexpected. I don't believe we've been introduced." "People call me Superman," Clark replied cautiously. "I'm Earth's protector." "Who are you?" The man smiled, a practiced, diplomatic smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What a coincidence. I'm here to protect Earth too. You can call me Omni-Man." The Global Defense Agency had been monitoring Superman since his first appearance in Metropolis. Director Cecil Stedman had files 3 inches thick on the superhuman's activities, capabilities, and possible origins. Alien, he'd concluded early on, after analyzing footage of Superman's flight capabilities. No human, no matter how enhanced, can ignore physics like that. He'd been preparing contingencies, gathering resources for the inevitable day when Superman's intentions became clear. The appearance of a second superpowered alien threw all those plans into disarray. "Sir," his assistant said, entering his office without knocking, "you need to see this." The monitors in Stedman's office switched to a live news feed showing Superman and the newcomer, Omni-Man, hovering above New York Harbor. "Have we made contact?" Stedman asked, already reaching for the secure phone. "Not yet. We weren't tracking this new arrival until Superman intercepted him." Stedman watched the two figures on the screen, noting their similar capabilities but vastly different appearances. Where Superman wore bright colors and moved with an almost gentle caution, this Omni-Man carried himself with military bearing, his costume more uniform than costume. "Get me everything on this Omni-Man. And prepare the Cobalt Protocol, just in case." "Sir," his assistant hesitated, "the Cobalt Protocol isn't ready." "The power requirements alone, then get it as ready as possible," Stedman cut him off. Because one superpowered alien was concerning. 2 might be the start of an invasion. Viltrumite, Omni-Man explained, sipping coffee across from Clark in a deserted diner near the harbor. They'd both changed into civilian clothes, Omni-Man now wearing a sweater and slacks, introducing himself as Nolan Grayson. My people have been observing Earth for centuries, he continued. We're an advanced race dedicated to sharing our knowledge with developing worlds. Think of us as cosmic guardians. Clark nodded slowly, taking this in. After years of believing he was the last survivor of a dead world, the idea of other advanced aliens was simultaneously thrilling and suspicious. And you've just been, watching? All this time, he asked. Nolan shrugged. Viltrumite protocol is non-interference until a civilization reaches a certain technological threshold. Earth recently crossed that line. So you're here as, what, an ambassador? Something like that. Nolan's eyes narrowed slightly. Though I'm curious about you. You're clearly not human, yet you're not Viltrumite either. Your abilities are similar, but your physical structure is different. Clark hesitated. Should he reveal his Kryptonian origins to this stranger? Something made him hold back. I'm just someone trying to help, he said finally. Nolan smiled again, that same diplomatic expression. Noble. We share that goal, then. He extended his hand across the table. Perhaps we should work together. Clark shook the offered hand, feeling the controlled strength behind Nolan's grip. I'd like that. Earth could use all the help it can get. But as they parted ways later, Clark couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Something about Nolan Grayson felt rehearsed, calculated. Like he wasn't sharing the whole truth. That night, Superman did something he'd never done before. He followed another person secretly, using his superhearing and vision to track Omni-Man from a distance as the Viltrumite flew to a suburban area outside the city. To Clark's surprise, Omni-Man descended to a normal-looking house, changed into civilian clothes, and went inside like any ordinary person returning home. Through the walls, Clark saw a woman greeting him with a kiss, a human woman. Feeling like an intruder, Clark was about to leave when he heard a child's voice, Dad. Did you see Superman on the news? Do you think you guys will team up? That would be so awesome. A boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, ran into the room, clutching action figures. We'll see, Mark, Nolan replied, ruffling the boy's hair. He seems interesting. Clark flew away, more confused than ever. Omni-Man, Nolan, had a human family. A wife, a child. That hadn't been in any of his explanations about being a Viltrumite observer. What else wasn't he sharing? The Guardians of the Globe had been Earth's premier superhero team for nearly a decade before Superman appeared. Based in a secret headquarters outside Washington, D.C., they responded to global threats beyond the capabilities of normal military or law enforcement. Darkwing, the team's strategist, was reviewing security footage when the alert came in. Unidentified metahuman activity in Seattle, the automated system announced. Class A threat level. Within minutes, the team had assembled in the briefing room, War Woman with her battle mace, the super-fast Red Rush, the indestructible Immortal, the psychic Aquarius, the plasma-wielding Green Ghost, and the mighty Martian Man. What are we looking at? Asked the Immortal, the team's leader. Darkwing brought up the satellite feed showing a massive creature rampaging through downtown Seattle. Unknown entity, approximately 50 feet tall, with regenerative capabilities and extreme durability. Local authorities are overwhelmed. Standard response protocol. Red Rush asked, already vibrating with impatience. With a twist, Darkwing replied. We've got company. He switched the feed to show Superman already on the scene, evacuating civilians. The Immortal frowned. Superman's on the West Coast now. That's new. He's not the only one, Darkwing added, zooming out to show a second figure flying toward the scene, a white and blue-clad man they'd all seen on the news recently. Omni-Man, War Woman said. Convenient timing for him to show up just as Superman expands his territory. Conspiracy theories later, the Immortal decided. Right now, Seattle needs us. Guardians, move out. The creature, a mutated experiment from a Dartech laboratory, they would later learn, had already leveled 3 city blocks by the time Superman contained it in an improvised barrier of crushed cars and concrete debris. Stay down, he warned the creature, which responded by spitting acid that would have melted the face of anyone with normal human durability. Superman wiped the corrosive substance away, barely feeling the burn. We can do this the easy way, or, a blur of white and blue slammed into the creature like a missile, sending it crashing through Superman's barrier and into an office building. Sorry to interrupt, Omni-Man called, hovering nearby, but I've found the direct approach works best with these situations. Before Superman could respond, the air filled with the sound of a supersonic aircraft. The Guardian's transport deposited the team on the street before cloaking itself again. Superman, the Immortal acknowledged with a nod. Omni-Man. The Guardians will take it from here. We've got this under control, Superman began, but was cut off by the creature bursting from the damaged building, now even larger and sporting new appendages where Omni-Man had struck it. It adapts to physical trauma, Superman explained quickly. The more you hit it, the stronger it gets. The Immortal processed this information immediately. Red Rush, evacuate remaining civilians. Aquarius, psychic containment. Green Ghost, energy barriers. Darkwing, find a weak point. War Woman, Martian Man, with me on distraction duty. The team moved with practiced precision, executing their roles flawlessly. Superman found himself momentarily impressed by their coordination. Always a strategy with these humans, Omni-Man commented, floating beside him. Shall we show them how it's really done? Before Superman could object, Omni-Man streaked toward the creature again. This time, Superman intercepted him mid-flight. Wait, he said firmly, matching Omni-Man's speed and strength to hold him back. You'll only make it stronger. We need to work together. For a brief moment, something cold flashed in Nolan's eyes, something that made Clark's instincts flare in warning. Then it was gone, replaced by that diplomatic smile. Of course, Omni-Man agreed. What's your plan? Working together, Superman, Omni-Man, and the Guardians managed to subdue the creature. Superman used his freeze breath to slow its metabolic processes, Aquarius suppressed its consciousness with psychic energy, and Darkwing administered a specialized sedative to its exposed nervous system. As authorities contained the unconscious creature, the Immortal approached the 2 alien heroes. Impressive work, he said. Both of you. Just helping out, Superman replied with genuine modesty. Perhaps we should discuss a more formal arrangement, the Immortal suggested. The world's getting more dangerous. Having powerhouses like you two working with the Guardians could make a difference. Superman hesitated. He'd always operated independently, but the Guardians had resources and experience he lacked. I'm open to collaboration, he said finally. Omni-Man smiled thinly. Count me in as well. Always happy to assist Earth's champions. Something in his tone made several of the Guardians exchange glances, but the Immortal simply nodded. We'll be in touch, he promised. As they parted ways, Superman caught Omni-Man staring at the departing Guardians with an expression he couldn't quite decipher, calculation, perhaps, or assessment. Like a general surveying troops. Not for the first time, Clark wondered what Nolan Grayson's true mission on Earth might be. 5 years passed. Superman became Earth's most beloved hero, working both independently and alongside the Guardians of the Globe on major threats. His relationship with Omni-Man remained professional but distant, they cooperated when necessary but rarely sought each other out. Clark Kent, meanwhile, had completed his education and secured a job as a reporter at the Daily Planet, allowing him to stay informed about emerging situations while maintaining his civilian cover. His colleague, Lois Lane, had become a close friend, an occasional headache, given her determination to get an exclusive interview with Superman. He trusts me, Clark often said when Lois complained about his supposed connection to the hero. Then use that trust to get me 5 minutes with him, Lois would counter. That's all I need. On this particular morning, they were arguing the point again in the planet's break room when the building shook. Coffee cups rattled off tables. Windows cracked. Earthquake, someone asked. Clark's enhanced hearing picked up the truth: explosions, several of them, coordinated across the city. A synchronized attack. I need to find a photographer, he said lamely, already backing toward the stairwell. Lois gave him a suspicious look but was too focused on the breaking story to follow him. Minutes later, Superman flew above Metropolis, assessing the situation. 5 separate explosions had targeted infrastructure, bridges, the power grid, water treatment. And at each site, a familiar type of tech was visible in the wreckage. Alien technology. The same kind used by a race of conquerors Superman had helped repel the previous year. His communicator, provided by the Guardians, activated. Superman, this is Darkwing. Are you seeing this? I'm on it, Superman confirmed. The Kundun tech is unmistakable. But we drove them off-world. Evidently some stayed behind. We're tracking similar attacks in 4 other major cities. The Guardians are mobilizing, but we're spread thin. What about Omni-Man? Superman asked, using his supervision to check for survivors at the nearest explosion site. A pause. No response on his communicator. Listen, we need you at the Washington attack. It's targeting the Pentagon. Potential nuclear material involved. On my way, Superman said, already accelerating to supersonic speed, creating a pressure wave that extinguished the fires below as he departed. He reached Washington, D.C. in minutes, immediately spotting the problem. A massive device, clearly of Kundun design, had been installed at the Pentagon's main power station. It was counting down, the alien numerals ticking away. 2 Guardians, War Woman and Darkwing, were already on scene, evacuating personnel while trying to access the device. Superman. War Woman called as he landed beside them. Can you see inside this thing? We can't make sense of the mechanism. Superman focused his vision, peering through layers of alien metal and circuitry. It's not just a bomb, he realized. It's a dimensional rift generator. If it activates, it'll create a portal to Kundun space. An invasion point, Darkwing concluded grimly. Can you disarm it? Superman examined the device more carefully. Yes, but I need time. The internal mechanism is shielded with lead. You've got 3 minutes, Darkwing said, checking the countdown. We'll secure the perimeter. Superman worked quickly, using his heat vision to cut through the device's outer layers while being careful not to trigger any failsafes. He was making progress when his superhearing picked up a familiar sound, the displacement of air by a body moving at supersonic speed. Omni-Man arrived, landing with enough force to crack the concrete. Sorry I'm late, he said, taking in the situation. Similar device in Baltimore. Had to prioritize. We've got this, War Woman said, a hint of suspicion in her tone. Superman's disarming it now. Omni-Man stepped closer, examining the device. Kundun technology. Impressive that they managed to smuggle these to Earth without detection. Less admiring, more helping, Darkwing suggested sharply. Superman continued working, ignoring the tension. He'd nearly reached the core mechanism when his communicator crackled. Emergency. The Immortal's voice was strained. All Guardians, return to headquarters immediately. We're under attack. The transmission cut off abruptly. War Woman and Darkwing exchanged alarmed looks. Go, Superman said without looking up from his work. I've almost got this. Omni-Man and I can finish here. The 2 Guardians hesitated only briefly before departing, their transport decloaking to retrieve them. Just you and me now, Omni-Man observed as they disappeared into the sky. Need assistance? Superman finally reached the device's core, a swirling energy matrix connected to timing circuits. Actually, yes. I need to freeze this containment field while simultaneously cutting these 3 circuits. Can you use your cold breath on my mark? Omni-Man moved beside him. Ready when you are. Superman positioned his heat vision. Now. Together, they neutralized the device, the countdown freezing with 17 seconds remaining. The energy matrix destabilized harmlessly, the dimensional rift collapsing before it could form. Superman exhaled in relief. That was close. We should check on the Guardians. I'm sure they're fine, Omni-Man said, his voice oddly casual. The immortal tends to overreact. Superman gave him a sharp look. Their headquarters was under attack. That's not something to dismiss. Omni-Man shrugged. You're right, of course. After you. They flew toward the Guardians' headquarters, Superman pushing his speed to the limit. Something felt wrong, the immortal wasn't prone to panic, and the abrupt end to his transmission suggested a serious threat. When they arrived, the facility appeared intact from the outside, its cloaking system still operational. But Superman's X-ray vision revealed the truth before they even entered. Bodies. Everywhere. No, he whispered, bursting through the main entrance. The scene inside was a massacre. The immortal lay broken near what remained of the central computer, his supposedly unkillable body twisted at impossible angles. War Woman and Darkwing had barely made it inside before being struck down. The others were scattered throughout the facility, each killed with brutal efficiency. This is... Superman couldn't find words, kneeling beside the fallen heroes. Who could have done this? Behind him, Omni-Man surveyed the carnage with an expression that, had Superman been looking, might have given everything away. A tragedy, Nolan said, his voice perfectly modulated to convey shock and grief. They were Earth's finest. Superman stood slowly, his mind racing. The attacks were coordinated. The Kundun devices, the false emergency signals to separate us, and then this. Someone knew exactly how to divide our forces. Someone with intimate knowledge of Guardian protocols, Omni-Man agreed. We need to alert global authorities, Superman decided. Whoever did this could still be, his superhearing picked up something, a faint heartbeat. Immortal. Still alive, barely. Superman rushed to his side. He's still breathing. We need to get him medical attention. As he leaned down to carefully lift the fallen hero, Superman missed the flash of annoyance that crossed Omni-Man's face. He didn't miss, however, the sudden pressure wave as Omni-Man moved, not toward him, but toward the facility's power core. An explosion rocked the building, sending Superman and the Immortal's body tumbling. Emergency systems activated, blast doors sealing the various sections. Nolan. Superman called through the smoke. What happened? Secondary device, Omni-Man's voice replied from somewhere in the wreckage. Must have been triggered by our entry. This place is coming down. The structural integrity of the facility was indeed failing, even Superman could see that. With the Immortal in his arms, he had no choice but to evacuate, bursting through the ceiling into clear air as the headquarters collapsed behind him. Omni-Man emerged from a different section, his uniform torn and singed, selling the illusion of a narrow escape. Any other survivors? He asked. Superman shook his head grimly. Just the Immortal, and he's barely hanging on. We need to get him to a hospital. I know a secure facility, Omni-Man offered. Follow me. As they flew, carrying the unconscious Immortal between them, Superman's mind worked overtime. The timing of everything, the attacks, the Guardians' massacre, Omni-Man's late arrival and then his presence during the facility's destruction, it all felt connected somehow. But why would Nolan be involved in something so monstrous? He had a human wife, a son. He'd worked alongside the Guardians for years. It didn't make sense. Unless everything he'd said about the Viltrumites' mission on Earth had been a lie. How's Mark doing with his science project? Debbie Grayson asked as she set dinner on the table. He seemed frustrated last night. Nolan smiled, helping himself to pot roast. I gave him some pointers this morning. He's a bright kid, just impatient. Wonder where he gets that from, Debbie teased. Their domestic normalcy was interrupted by a special news bulletin on the television they kept on during dinner, a habit from Debbie's days as a reporter. We interrupt this program with breaking news, the announcer said gravely. The superhero team known as the Guardians of the Globe has been confirmed dead following an attack on their headquarters earlier today. The only survivor, the hero known as the Immortal, remains in critical condition at an undisclosed location. Debbie's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, Nolan, you're friends, I should check in, Nolan said, already standing. The Global Defense Agency will be coordinating the response. Of course, Debbie nodded. Should I tell Mark when he gets home from practice? Let me handle that, Nolan replied, kissing her forehead. No need to upset him until we know more. As he changed into his Omni-Man costume, Nolan's thoughts weren't on his fallen comrades, but on the one loose end, Superman. The Kryptonian had survived Krypton's destruction through sheer luck, arriving on Earth and nearly ruining years of careful Viltrumite planning. The original strategy had been simple: Nolan would integrate himself with Earth's heroes, earn their trust, eliminate them when the time was right, and prepare the planet for Viltrumite occupation. Superman's appearance had forced adaptations to that plan. Now, with the Guardians eliminated, only the Kryptonian stood as a potential obstacle. And he was growing suspicious. The Viltrumite Empire wouldn't be pleased with these complications. Nolan had assured them he could handle Earth's preparation single-handedly. Having to explain Superman's continued existence wouldn't reflect well on his competence. He would need to deal with the Kryptonian soon. But carefully. A direct confrontation might not end in his favor. The extent of Superman's powers remained unclear, and he demonstrated abilities beyond standard Viltrumite capabilities. For now, maintaining his cover was the priority. Superman still trusted him, or at least wanted to. That was an advantage Nolan could exploit. Cecil Stedman reviewed the security footage for the 20th time, his face grim in the blue light of the monitor. Play it again, he instructed his assistant. Focus on the main entrance, timestamp 1422. The footage showed the Guardians' headquarters from an external camera. War Woman and Darkwing arrived, rushing inside. 3 minutes later, Superman and Omni-Man approached from different directions, entering seconds apart. Then the explosion, the collapse. Something's not right, Stedman muttered. The timing is too perfect. Sir, the President is asking for an update on the Immortal's condition. Stedman switched off the monitor. Tell him no change. And increase security on the medical facility, no one gets in except Superman and myself. Not Omni-Man, his assistant asked, surprised. Stedman's expression darkened. Especially not Omni-Man. The Global Defense Agency had been building contingencies for superhuman threats since its inception. For the Guardians, for Superman, and yes, for Omni-Man. But those contingencies required time and resources to activate. Time they might not have if his suspicions were correct. Sir, his assistant said hesitantly, there's something else. That energy signature you asked us to monitor around Superman? We're detecting it again, but it's moving. Stedman straightened. Where? The Grayson residence in Michigan. Clark Kent sat at his desk at the Daily Planet, ostensibly working on a story about the Guardians' tragic deaths. In reality, he was reviewing everything he knew about Nolan Grayson. 5 years of cooperation. Countless missions together. Family dinners at the Grayson home, where he'd watched young Mark grow from a Superman-obsessed kid into a teenager eagerly awaiting his Viltrumite heritage to manifest. Had it all been an act? The evidence was circumstantial at best. Nolan's late arrival during the attacks. His presence in the Guardian headquarters just before its destruction. The convenient explanation for everything. But what motive could he possibly have for murdering Earth's greatest heroes? If the Viltrumites truly were benevolent guardians of developing worlds, such actions would be unconscionable. Unless they weren't benevolent at all. Clark's research was interrupted by a text message from an unknown number. Metropolis General, Roof, 10 minutes. Come alone. C.S. Cecil Stedman. The enigmatic director of the GDA rarely made direct contact. 9 minutes later, Superman landed on the hospital roof where Stedman waited, cigarette in hand despite the no smoking sign. The immortal's awake, Stedman said without preamble. He spoke one word before losing consciousness again, Nolan. Superman felt cold despite his invulnerability. That doesn't necessarily mean, cut the crap, Superman, Stedman interrupted. We both know something's wrong with this picture. The Guardians were the most capable team on the planet. Nothing short of a power on your level could have taken them down so efficiently. Superman couldn't argue with that logic. What do you need from me? Surveillance. Grayson's at home with his family right now. If he is responsible, he'll make a move soon, either to finish the immortal or to deal with you. You want me to spy on him? We've worked together for years. Stedman took a long drag of his cigarette. And in those years, how much have you actually learned about Viltrumite intentions? About their observations of Earth? About why a supposedly advanced alien race would send just one representative who happens to take a human wife and have a half-human child? Put that way, the gaps in Nolan's story became more apparent. I'll watch him, Superman agreed reluctantly. But if he's innocent, this stays between us. Deal, Stedman nodded. And Superman? Be careful. If I'm right about Omni-Man, you might be the only thing standing between Earth and whatever he's planning. Mark Grayson threw the baseball with perfect accuracy, hitting the makeshift target in the backyard for the 30th consecutive time. Dad! Did you see that? I didn't miss once. Nolan looked up from the newspaper he'd been pretending to read while monitoring his son's physical development. Good job, son. Your coordination is improving. At 14, Mark showed no signs of his Viltrumite heritage yet, but Nolan wasn't concerned. The powers typically manifested during late adolescence in half-breeds. Do you think I'll be able to fly soon? Mark asked eagerly. Like you and Superman? When you're ready, Nolan replied, ruffling his son's hair. It's not something that can be rushed. Mark's fascination with Superman had always been a minor irritant to Nolan. His own son, idolizing the very obstacle to Viltrumite plans. Still, he managed to smile. Why don't you go help your mother with dinner? I need to make a call. As Mark headed inside, Nolan activated a secure communication device hidden inside his watch, Viltrumite technology disguised as an ordinary timepiece. Report, came the terse response. Phase 1 complete, Nolan said quietly. Indigenous heroes eliminated except for the Kryptonian. Requesting instructions. A pause. The Kryptonian was unexpected. His continued existence complicates matters. I can eliminate him, Nolan offered, though he wasn't entirely confident of that fact. Unnecessary risk at this stage. Maintain cover. Observe his weaknesses. We are dispatching additional assets. Nolan frowned. Additional assets? I was assured this was my assignment alone. Circumstances have changed. The destruction of Krypton should have eliminated all Kryptonians. This survivor's presence on your target world cannot be coincidental. Understood, Nolan said, masking his displeasure. Additional Viltrumites would mean scrutiny of his methods, his family, his entire operation. When can I expect? He stopped abruptly, his enhanced senses detecting something. A subtle displacement of air. The faint sound of a heartbeat, trying to remain steady but elevated slightly from normal human baseline. Someone was watching him. Someone who could hover silently hundreds of feet above his home, just at the edge of even Viltrumite perception. Situation update required, the voice from his communicator prompted. Potential surveillance, Nolan replied tersely. Will report when secure. Out. He deactivated the communicator, his expression returning to that of a relaxed family man as he turned toward the house. But his mind was racing. If Superman was watching him, how much had he heard? How much did he suspect? The timetable would need to be accelerated. The Kryptonian would have to be dealt with sooner than planned. Inside, Debbie and Mark were setting the table, laughing about something. His human family, his cover for all these years, but also, surprisingly, a source of genuine attachment. Mark carried his bloodline, his legacy. And Debbie. Nolan pushed the thought away. Sentiment was a weakness. One the Viltrumite Empire had trained him to overcome. Everything okay, honey? Debbie asked, noticing his expression. Nolan smiled, the practiced diplomat smile that had served him so well. Just fine. Just thinking about the Guardians. Such a tragedy. Will there be a memorial service? Mark asked. Superman will be there, right? I'm sure he will, Nolan replied, meeting his son's eager gaze. We all want to honor our fallen comrades. The word comrades tasted bitter on his tongue. High above the Grayson home, Superman hovered, his superhearing focused on the conversation below. He'd arrived just in time to hear Nolan's report to someone, confirmation of his worst fears. The Guardians' deaths hadn't been a tragedy. They'd been an execution. Phase 1, Nolan had called it. Which meant there was a Phase 2. And based on the conversation, that phase involved him. Superman's communicator vibrated. Stedman. Did you hear? The director asked without greeting. Enough, Superman confirmed grimly. He killed them. All of them. And he's working with others, more Viltrumites coming to Earth. Then we're out of time, Stedman said. The Immortal's condition is deteriorating. Whatever Omni-Man did to him, it's beyond our medical capabilities to repair. Before he loses consciousness again, he wants to speak with you. I'm on my way, Superman said. But Stedman, if Nolan realizes I know, he'll accelerate whatever they're planning, Stedman finished. I'm activating everything we have. Just get to the Immortal. Now. Superman cast one last look at the Grayson home below, at the family having dinner, unaware that the man at the head of their table was a murderer with plans that likely meant disaster for Earth. Then he streaked away, pushing his speed to the limit. Inside the secure medical facility, the Immortal lay connected to dozens of machines, his supposedly indestructible body broken beyond recognition. Only his incredible healing factor and sheer willpower kept him alive. Superman, he wheezed as Clark entered, his voice barely audible. Save your strength, Superman said gently, taking the hero's hand. No time, the Immortal managed. Omni-Man, not what he claims. Viltrumites, conquerors. Preparing Earth. I know, Superman assured him. We'll stop him. The Immortal's grip tightened with surprising strength. No. You don't understand. He's not alone. Never has been. Superman frowned. What do you mean? Sleeper agents, among us. For years. The attack, distraction. Real target. The Immortal coughed, blood speckling his lips. Real target? Superman prompted. You, the dying hero whispered. They fear. Krypton. Always have. Before Superman could ask what he meant, alarms blared. The facility shook. Explosion. Stedman burst into the room. We're under attack. Multiple hostiles with Omni-Man's power signature. Superman looked back at the Immortal, but the hero's eyes had glazed over. His heart had stopped. I'm sorry, Superman said, gently closing the Immortal's eyes before turning to Stedman. Get your people out. I'll handle this. Handle what, exactly? A familiar voice asked from the doorway. Omni-Man hovered there, costume pristine, arms crossed. Behind him, through the broken wall, Superman could see two more figures in similar uniforms, Viltrumites, undoubtedly. It's over, Nolan, Superman said, positioning himself between Omni-Man and Stedman. I heard your report. I know what you did to the Guardians. Nolan sighed, almost looking genuinely regretful. I had hoped we could maintain our professional courtesy a while longer. You've been a fascinating study, Kal-El. The last Kryptonian. Why? Superman demanded. Why kill them? Why lie all these years? Because that's what conquering a planet looks like, Nolan replied simply. The Viltrumite Empire requires Earth. The indigenous heroes were an obstacle. You are an obstacle. And your family? Mark? Debbie? Are they just part of your cover too? Something flickered in Nolan's eyes, the first genuine emotion Superman had seen from him. Mark carries Viltrumite blood. He belongs with his people. As for Debbie. He shrugged. Necessary for maintaining my identity. You're a monster, Superman said quietly. Nolan smiled. No. I'm a patriot. And now, I'm going to complete my mission. He moved with incredible speed, but Superman was ready, meeting his charge with equal force. Their collision shook the entire facility, sending Stedman and the medical staff scrambling for cover. Get everyone out. Superman shouted as he grappled with Nolan. Evacuate the city. The other Viltrumites moved to intervene, but Nolan barked an order, stay back. The Kryptonian is mine. They crashed through walls, through floors, eventually bursting out of the facility entirely and continuing their battle in the sky above the city. Each punch created shockwaves that shattered windows for blocks. Each defensive maneuver sent them careening through buildings. You don't have to do this, Nolan, Superman tried, blocking a particularly vicious strike. Whatever the Viltrumite Empire is planning, it's not worth betraying the people who trusted you. Who loved you. You understand nothing of Viltrumite purpose, Nolan snarled, landing a blow that sent Superman tumbling through the air. Our race is destined to rule. It's the natural order. Superman recovered, countering with a burst of super speed that caught Nolan off guard, driving him into the side of a skyscraper. There's nothing natural about conquest, Superman shot back. Nothing noble about murdering your friends. They were never my friends, Nolan said coldly, breaking free and hovering opposite Superman. They were obstacles. Just like you. The battle resumed with greater intensity, both combatants holding nothing back now. Superman's heat vision scored Nolan's chest, while Nolan's punch dislocated Superman's jaw. They were evenly matched in many ways, both with super strength, invulnerability, flight. But Superman had abilities Nolan lacked. His freeze breath created momentary openings. His heat vision kept Nolan at a distance when needed. His greater speed allowed him to evade the worst of Nolan's attacks. Yet Nolan had something Superman didn't, ruthlessness. A willingness to use civilians as distractions or shields. A combat experience born of countless conquests across the galaxy. You hold back, Nolan observed after a particularly brutal exchange left them both breathing hard. Even now, you restrain yourself. That's why you'll lose. I hold back because innocent people matter, Superman replied. Something you've forgotten, if you ever knew it. Sentiment, Nolan scoffed. Another weakness. He grabbed a nearby helicopter, journalists who'd been covering the battle, and hurled it directly at a crowded intersection below. Superman immediately broke off their fight to save the helicopter, catching its seconds before impact and setting it safely on the ground. It was the opening Nolan needed. The blow caught Superman from behind, sending him crashing through concrete and steel, deep into the city's subway system. Before he could recover, Nolan was on him again, pummeling him with savage efficiency. The Empire studied Kryptonians extensively, Nolan explained between strikes. Your power comes from this system's yellow sun. Impressive, but not unique. We've conquered races with similar abilities before. Superman fought back, landing several solid hits that clearly hurt Nolan. But the Viltrumites' training gave him an edge in close quarters. What happens to Earth when I'm gone? Superman asked, trying to buy time to recover. What happens to Mark? To Debbie? Earth becomes a Viltrumite colony, Nolan replied matter-of-factly. Those humans with useful genetic traits will be preserved. The rest. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Superman understood the implication, and it filled him with cold rage. No, he said simply. Not while I'm here. Something changed in that moment, a mental barrier lifting. Superman had always held back, always restrained his full potential out of fear of causing collateral damage. But with Earth's existence at stake, he made a different calculation. His eyes glowed red, not with the focused beams of his heat vision, but with raw solar energy. The ground beneath them trembled. What is this? Nolan asked, showing uncertainty for the first time. This, Superman said, his voice resonating strangely, is what happens when I stop holding back. The subway tunnel exploded outward as Superman unleashed his full strength, catching Nolan with a punch that sent the Viltrumite rocketing upward, through street level and beyond, into the upper atmosphere. Superman followed, moving so fast he broke the sound barrier multiple times in his ascent. Their battle continued above the clouds, each blow creating thunder that rolled across the city below. Superman fought with a controlled fury, driving Nolan higher and higher, away from civilians, away from Earth. You can't win, Nolan insisted, though his confidence was clearly shaken. The Empire will send others. Hundreds of Viltrumites, each as strong as me. Then I'll face them too, Superman replied. But today, it's just you and me. As they approached the edge of space, Superman realized he had one final advantage, his ability to survive in vacuum indefinitely, while Nolan, for all his Viltrumite physiology, still needed to breathe. With a burst of speed, Superman drove them both beyond the atmosphere, continuing their battle in the cold void of Earth orbit. Nolan's strikes became more desperate as his oxygen depleted. His movements slowed. His invulnerability, impressive as it was, couldn't protect him from the vacuum of space. Yield, Superman demanded, holding the struggling Viltrumite. Nolan's response was a defiant glare, even as his consciousness began to fade. Superman had a choice: let Nolan die in the vacuum, or return him to Earth where he could face justice for his crimes. The decision wasn't difficult. Grasping the unconscious Viltrumite, Superman descended back toward the planet, the heat of re-entry enveloping them both in a fiery cocoon. They landed in the middle of the destroyed medical facility, where Steadman and a containment team waited with what appeared to be specialized restraints. Will those hold him? Superman asked, laying Nolan on the ground. They're designed based on our observations of both your physiologies, Steadman replied. Combined with targeted sedatives, they should work long enough for interrogation. What about the other Viltrumites? Withdrawn after your battle moved to orbit. But they'll be back. Superman nodded grimly. And Nolan's family? Debbie and Mark? Protective custody, Steadman said. The boy shows no signs of powers yet, but we're monitoring. Superman looked down at Omni-Man, Nolan Grayson, as the containment team secured him. The Viltrumite had murdered the Guardians, betrayed Earth, and nearly killed Superman himself. Yet Clark couldn't help feeling a twinge of pity. How empty must Nolan's existence have been, living a lie for all these years, viewing the humans around him as merely resources to be exploited. When he wakes up, Superman said, I want to speak with him. Steadman raised an eyebrow. You think you can reason with him? After everything? Superman shook his head. Not reason with him. Understand him. If the Viltrumite Empire is the threat he claims, we need to know everything, their weaknesses, their strategies, their timeline. And if he won't cooperate? Then we prepare without his help, Superman said resolutely. Earth just lost its greatest heroes, but it still has me. And I won't let the Viltrumites take this world without a fight. As medical personnel tended to his injuries, Superman's thoughts turned to young Mark Grayson, a boy who'd idolized both his father and Superman, now caught between two worlds, two legacies. What would happen when his Viltrumite heritage manifested? Which path would he choose? The future suddenly seemed more uncertain than ever. The Guardians were gone. Omni-Man was exposed but neutralized. An alien empire had Earth in its sights. And Superman stood as perhaps the last line of defense, a Kryptonian guardian for a world that wasn't originally his, but had become his home. Whatever came next, one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 2, Truth and Consequences, Still Nothing. Cecil Stedman asked, watching Superman through the one-way glass. 5 years had passed since the confrontation that exposed Omni-Man's true nature. 5 years of interrogations leading nowhere. Nolan Grayson sat in his specialized containment cell, the same position he'd maintained for months, saying nothing. He speaks only to request basic necessities, the guard reported. No information about the Viltrumite Empire, their plans, or potential weaknesses. Superman stood from the chair across from Nolan's cell. Another failed attempt at conversation. He's waiting for something, Superman said as he exited the containment area, joining Cecil in the observation room. Or someone. The other Viltrumites haven't made a move since your battle, Cecil reminded him. Our deep space monitoring hasn't detected any unusual activity. That doesn't mean they're not coming. Superman's expression remained grim. How's Mark? Cecil sighed. Still no powers. Debbie's been struggling, raising a teenage boy alone isn't easy, even with our support. And the psychological evaluations? As expected. He's angry, confused. Feels betrayed by his father. Idolizes you even more now. Cecil gave Superman a pointed look. He could use a visit. Superman nodded reluctantly. His relationship with the Grayson family had become complicated since Nolan's imprisonment. Debbie welcomed his support, but Mark, the boy's emotions were understandably turbulent. I'll stop by this weekend, he promised. Right now, I need to get back to Metropolis. I have a deadline. Cecil almost smiled. The great Superman, worried about a newspaper deadline. Clark Kent has to pay rent too. The Daily Planet newsroom buzzed with the controlled chaos of an approaching print deadline. Clark Kent hunched over his keyboard, typing rapidly while simultaneously using his enhanced hearing to monitor police frequencies across the city. Kent. Perry White's voice boomed across the bullpen. Where's that piece on the mayor's infrastructure proposal? Just finishing it up, Chief, Clark called back, adding a final sentence and sending the article to his editor's inbox. And remind Lane her GDA exposé was due yesterday. Perry added before disappearing back into his office. Clark smiled to himself. Reminding Lois Lane about deadlines was like reminding a hurricane to stay on schedule, pointless and potentially dangerous. As if summoned by the thought, Lois dropped into the chair beside his desk, coffee in hand, dark circles under her eyes suggesting another all-nighter. Tell Perry I'm working on something bigger than the GDA puff piece, she said without preamble. I've got a source inside the Grayson protective detail. Clark's fingers froze over his keyboard. Lois, don't Lois me, Smallville. It's been 5 years. The public deserves to know what happened to Omni-Man and why the government has his family stashed away like nuclear secrets. The official statement is grade A bullshit, and you know it, Lois interrupted. Omni-Man didn't return to his homeworld for personal reasons. Something went down between him and Superman, something big enough to keep him off the grid for 5 years. Clark adjusted his glasses nervously. Maybe some stories are classified for good reason. Lois leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. My source says the boy is starting to show signs. Like father, like son. This was news to Clark. Cecil hadn't mentioned any developments with Mark's potential powers. Either the GDA director was keeping secrets, or Lois's source was misinformed. Careful, Lois. That family has been through enough without reporters digging into their lives. Since when are you the defender of government secrecy? Lois challenged. And don't tell me it's because of your chummy relationship with Superman. Their conversation was interrupted by breaking news alerts flashing across the newsroom monitors. A massive fire had broken out at Metropolis General Hospital, with hundreds of patients and staff trapped inside. Saved by the bell, Lois muttered. This conversation isn't over, Kent. Clark was already heading for the stairwell. Take notes for me at the press conference. Seconds later, Superman streaked across the Metropolis skyline toward the column of smoke rising from the hospital. The fire had spread rapidly, engulfing nearly half the structure. Emergency services were overwhelmed, evacuations barely beginning. Superman flew directly into the burning building through a shattered window, immediately using his super breath to extinguish flames in the critical care unit. He moved systematically through the floors, evacuating immobile patients first, then assisting firefighters with establishing safe exit routes. East Wing is about to collapse, he warned the incident commander after depositing another group of patients safely outside. The structural supports are compromised. We've still got people on the third floor, the commander replied urgently. My teams can't reach them through the stairs. I'll get them. Superman flew back into the inferno, using his X-ray vision to locate the remaining civilians. He found them, medical staff and patients huddled in a surgery suite, air running out as smoke poured through ventilation ducts. He broke through the wall, creating an exit where none had existed. Everyone, this way, he called, helping the weakest patients first. As he guided the last group towards safety, a familiar sound caught his attention, the distinctive whoosh of someone moving at superhuman speed. Another flying figure appeared through the smoke, helping evacuate the remaining civilians. For a moment, Clark's heart stopped. Omni-Man? But no, this figure was smaller, younger, and wore no costume. Just a teenager in a hoodie and jeans, flying awkwardly but effectively, carrying an elderly patient to safety. Mark Grayson. Their eyes met across the burning hospital wing. Mark looked as surprised as Superman felt. Then the ceiling between them collapsed, and the moment was gone. By the time Superman had secured the last patients and helped firefighters contain the blaze, Mark had disappeared. But the implications were clear, the boy had manifested his Viltrumite abilities. And he'd chosen to use them to help, not harm. That was either very good news or a very convincing act. He wasn't supposed to leave the safe house, Cecil fumed, pacing his office at GDA headquarters. How did he even get to Metropolis? He flew, obviously, Superman replied, arms crossed. The question is why? Did something happen? Cecil sighed, collapsing into his chair. Teenagers happen, Superman. He had an argument with his mother, stormed out. We thought he was just walking it off. Until he decided to fly halfway across the country and play hero at a burning hospital. Superman's tone softened. He saved lives, Cecil. Or he saw an opportunity to establish himself as trustworthy before the rest of his abilities fully develop. Cecil's paranoia was professional, not personal. We can't ignore his genetics. Nor can we condemn him for them, Superman countered. I need to talk to him. Not as Superman, but as someone who understands what he's going through. Cecil hesitated, then nodded. Debbie's been asking for your help anyway. The boy respects you, despite everything. Where is he now? Back at the safe house. Grounded until he's 30, according to his mother. A rare smile crossed Cecil's face. Even Viltrumite teenagers aren't immune to parental authority, it seems. The Grayson family's safe house was a comfortable suburban home in a quiet Colorado community, distinguishable from its neighbors only by the subtle security measures and GDA agents posing as landscape workers and delivery personnel. Clark Kent, dressed casually in jeans and a flannel shirt rather than his Superman costume or reporter attire, knocked on the front door, bearing a homemade apple pie from his mother's recipe. Debbie Grayson answered, looking simultaneously relieved and exhausted. 5 years had added streaks of gray to her hair and lines around her eyes, but she maintained the same direct gaze and warm smile that had made her one of the most respected local news anchors before her world collapsed. "Clark," she greeted him, accepting the pie. "Thanks for coming." "He's in the backyard, pretending to do homework." Clark followed her through the house, noticing the photos of Mark and Debbie but none of Nolan. The past had been carefully excised, at least on the surface. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Debbie's laugh held little humor. "My husband turned out to be an alien conqueror, I'm raising a half-alien teenage son who can now fly, and I haven't worked in my field for 5 years. I'm just peachy." "I'm sorry," Clark said, meaning it. "For all of it." Her expression softened. "You've done more than most would in your position. Mark may not show it, but he appreciates your visits." She gestured toward the back door. "Go easy on him about yesterday. He was just trying to help." Mark sat at a patio table, textbook spread around him, a physics problem set apparently forgotten as he stared at his own hand, clenching and unclenching his fist. "Testing out the new hardware?" Clark asked, taking the seat opposite him. Mark's head snapped up, surprise giving way to forced casualness. "Just stretching." "Mom send you to lecture me?" "No lecture," Clark promised. Though flying to Metropolis without telling anyone was a bit reckless. "Says the guy who flies around the world daily," Mark muttered, then sighed. "I didn't plan it. I was just angry. Felt like I needed to hit something. Then I heard about the hospital on the news and thought maybe I could help." "You did help," Clark confirmed. "You saved lives." Mark looked up, hope flickering across his features. "Really? I wasn't sure if I did anything right. It was my first time flying more than a few feet." "First time's always the roughest," Clark said, smiling. "I crashed through 3 barns and a water tower when I was figuring it out." "Seriously?" Mark leaned forward, eagerness breaking through his practiced teenage apathy. "What else? When did you discover you could fly? What about super strength? Heat vision?" Clark spent the next hour answering Mark's questions, sharing stories of his own awkward discoveries, the time he accidentally melted his high school locker, the first sonic boom he created while running to catch a bus, the embarrassment of sneezing and blowing out all the windows in the chemistry lab. Mark laughed, genuinely, for the first time since Clark had arrived. "So what happens now?" the boy asked finally. "Mom thinks the GDA will lock me up now that I have powers." "No one's locking you up," Clark assured him. "But there will need to be some rules, some training. These abilities, they're a gift, but they're also a responsibility." "Like what you do as Superman?" Clark nodded. "That's one path. But it's not the only one. What my dad did, that's another path, isn't it?" Mark asked, his voice quieter now. "Using these powers to conquer instead of protect." "Yes," Clark answered honestly. "But we all choose our own way, Mark. Your father's choices don't dictate yours. Have you talked to him? Does he ever ask about me?" The question carried so much pain that Clark considered lying. But Mark deserved better. "He doesn't speak much," Clark admitted. "But he has asked about you. Wanted to know if you were developing your abilities." Mark absorbed this silently, then asked the question Clark had been dreading, "Can I see him?" Cecil's response was predictable. "Absolutely not," the GDA director said flatly. "Putting them in the same room would be like lighting a match in a gas leak." "Mark needs closure," Superman argued. "He's manifesting powers, asking questions. If we don't provide answers, he'll seek them elsewhere." And if Nolan uses the opportunity to indoctrinate his son into Viltrumite ideology? Or worse, if this is what he's been waiting for, a chance to escape with the boy. Superman had considered this. I'll be present the entire time. At the first sign of manipulation or aggression, I'll end the visit. Cecil massaged his temples, a habit he'd developed during the years of Viltrumite crisis management. The psychological profile suggests Mark is stable, despite everything. His attachment to his human identity remains strong. Meaning he's more Debbie's son than Nolan's, at least emotionally, Cecil clarified. But introducing his father back into his life at this critical stage could either cement his human connections or undermine them, Superman finished. It's a risk either way. But denying him this request might push him away from us. Cecil stared at the security monitors showing Nolan's cell. The Viltrumite sat in silent meditation, as he had for much of his captivity. One visit, Cecil conceded finally. 15 minutes. Full security protocols, and you don't leave them alone for a second. Superman nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Cecil warned. If this backfires, we could be looking at Omni-Man 2.0, except this time with a child's emotional volatility added to Viltrumite strength. Mark fidgeted in the visitor's area, tugging at the collar of his shirt. Do I look okay? It's been 5 years. I was just a kid last time he saw me. Debbie straightened his collar with trembling hands. You look fine, honey. Her voice was steady despite her obvious apprehension. Remember, you don't owe him anything. If at any point you want to leave, I know, Mom, Mark assured her. Superman, will be right there. The security doors hissed open, and Superman entered, now in full costume. They're bringing him in now. Are you ready? Mark nodded, squaring his shoulders in an unconscious echo of his father's posture. Nolan Grayson entered the room escorted by guards wearing powered exoskeletons and carrying weapons that hummed with energy. His hands and feet were bound with specialized restraints, and a collar around his neck presumably contained some form of dampening technology. Despite these precautions, he moved with dignity. 5 years of confinement had not diminished his presence. If anything, the simple prison jumpsuit somehow emphasized the power contained within his frame. Mark, he said simply, his voice rough from disuse. Dad. Mark's voice cracked slightly on the word. The guards positioned Nolan in a reinforced chair across the table from Mark, then retreated to the perimeter of the room. Superman remained standing behind Mark, a silent guardian. For a long moment, father and son simply looked at each other, measuring the changes 5 years had wrought. You've grown, Nolan observed. Yeah, that happens, Mark replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into his tone. Your mother. She's fine. No thanks to you. Nolan nodded, accepting the hostility. I understand you've begun manifesting abilities. Mark glanced back at Superman, who gave a small nod of encouragement. Flying, mostly, Mark admitted. Some strength. It's all kind of new. It will develop rapidly now that it started, Nolan said. Your Viltrumite heritage expressing itself. Is that what you want to talk about? My Viltrumite heritage? Mark's hands clenched on the tabletop. Not the fact that you murdered the Guardians. Or lied to Mom for years. Or tried to kill Superman. Nolan's expression remained neutral. Would you believe me if I expressed regret for those actions? No. Then there's little point discussing them. Nolan leaned forward slightly. What matters now is you, Mark. What you're becoming. What choices you'll make with the power you're developing. I already know what choice I'm making, Mark said firmly. I'm not going to be like you. A flicker of something crossed Nolan's face, disappointment or perhaps pride, it was difficult to tell. The Viltrumite Empire will come for Earth eventually. With or without me, they'll come. And when they do, they'll expect you to join them. They'll be disappointed, Mark said coldly. Perhaps. Nolan's gaze shifted to Superman. Has he told you about Krypton? About how his world ended? Mark frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Everything. Nolan's voice intensified. Krypton was once a rival to the Viltrumite Empire. A civilization of comparable advancement, though physically weaker individually. When they refused to join the Empire, measures were taken. Superman's posture stiffened. What are you saying, Nolan? I'm saying, Kal-El, that Krypton's destruction may not have been the natural disaster you believe it to be. The claim hung in the air like a thunderclap. Superman's mind raced. Could it be true? Could the Viltrumites have somehow engineered Krypton's destruction? The timing of his arrival on Earth, coinciding with the Viltrumite preparation for conquest. You're lying, Mark accused. You're just trying to turn us against each other. Nolan shrugged. Believe what you wish. But ask yourself why the Empire fears Kryptonians enough to alter their standard conquest timeline. Why they sent additional agents to Earth after discovering Superman's existence. Additional agents? Superman stepped forward. What additional agents? A small smile played at the corner of Nolan's mouth. You didn't think I was the only Viltrumite on Earth, did you? We're very good at blending in when necessary. The implications were staggering. If other Viltrumites had infiltrated Earth society, positioned in strategic locations, waiting for the right moment to strike. That's enough, Superman said. This visit is over. Wait, Mark protested. He's just getting to the important stuff. That's exactly what concerns me, Superman replied. Guards, return Mr. Grayson to his cell. As the guards moved to escort Nolan out, the Viltrumite fixed his son with an intense gaze. Think for yourself, Mark. Question what they tell you. And remember, blood is thicker than water. When Nolan had been removed, Mark rounded on Superman. Why did you cut it short? He was finally talking. He was manipulating the situation, Mark. Trying to plant seeds of doubt and division. What if he was telling the truth? About Krypton? About other Viltrumites on Earth? Superman placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. Even lies can contain elements of truth. That's what makes them dangerous. The boy shrugged away the touch. So now what? We just pretend this didn't happen. Go back to me being under house arrest while you patrol the skies? No, Superman said firmly. Now we prepare you properly. If what your father suggests is true, and there are other Viltrumites on Earth, you need to be ready. Mark's anger gave way to surprise. Ready? How? Training. With me. The Arctic wind howled around the crystalline structure that had become Superman's fortress of solitude. Constructed using technology from his Kryptonian ship and expanded over the years, it served as both a sanctuary and a repository of knowledge from his lost homeworld. Mark stared in awe as they descended through the entry point hidden among glaciers. This is incredible. How long have you had this place? I started building it after the confrontation with your father, Superman explained, leading Mark through corridors of crystal and alien metal. I realized I needed to learn more about my Kryptonian heritage if I was going to protect Earth effectively. The central chamber housed a crystalline computer interface, currently displaying rotating star maps and Kryptonian text. Is this where you train? Mark asked, examining the spacious room. Among other things. Superman approached the crystal console. Computer, activate training protocol Alpha 3. Participant, Mark Grayson. Power level, novice. The chamber's lighting changed, and portions of the floor reconfigured, revealing training equipment designed for beings of immense strength. First rule, Superman said, removing his cape and placing it carefully aside, power without control is just destruction waiting to happen. For the next several hours, he guided Mark through basic exercises, controlling flight speed and direction, modulating strength for different tasks, enhancing senses without becoming overwhelmed by input. The boy was a quick study, his Viltrumite physiology responding instinctively to challenges. By the 5th hour, he could maintain stable flight patterns while performing complex maneuvers. "This is awesome!" Mark exclaimed after successfully navigating an obstacle course at supersonic speed. "When do we get to the good stuff? Heat vision? Super breath? Those are Kryptonian abilities, not Viltrumite," Superman explained. "Your powers will develop differently than mine." Mark's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Oh. What can Viltrumites do besides fly and punch things?" "Your father displayed incredible durability, enhanced healing, and longevity," Superman said. "Viltrumites apparently live for thousands of years, growing stronger with age. So basically I'm going to live forever and keep getting stronger?" Mark processed this. "That's actually kind of terrifying." Superman nodded, pleased by the boy's thoughtfulness. "Power without perspective is. That's why character matters more than ability." Their training session was interrupted by an alert from the Fortress computer. A priority communication from the GDA. Superman activated the channel. Cecil Stedman's face appeared on the crystal display, his expression grim. "We have a situation," the director said without preamble. "Multiple explosions across major cities worldwide. The pattern matches Viltrumite technology." Superman's jaw tightened. "Casualties?" "Minimal so far, they seem to be targeting infrastructure, not population centers. But that could change. We need you back." "We're on our way," Superman confirmed, already reaching for his cape. "We?" Cecil noticed Mark in the background. "Superman, the boy isn't ready for, he's coming with me," Superman interrupted. "Limited capacity, observation only. But he needs to see what we're dealing with." Cecil clearly wanted to argue but recognized the futility. "Fine. Report to GDA headquarters for briefing first." As the communication ended, Superman turned to find Mark already hovering anxiously. "Is this it?" the boy asked. "The Viltrumite invasion?" "I don't think so," Superman replied, leading them toward the fortress exit. "This feels like a test. Or a message. For who? You or me?" Superman didn't answer immediately, considering the timing of these attacks, immediately following Mark's visit with Nolan. "Perhaps both," he said finally. The Global Defense Agency's war room buzzed with activity as analysts tracked explosion sites and damage assessments poured in. World leaders demanded explanations on secure channels. Military forces worldwide moved to high alert status. Cecil briefed Superman and Mark in a side office, away from the chaos. 37 simultaneous detonations, he explained, displaying a world map with red dots indicating explosion sites. Power grids, water treatment facilities, communications hubs, transportation networks, all critical infrastructure, all using the same alien explosive compound we found in Nolan's ship. Sleeper agents, Superman concluded. Viltrumites positioned in key locations, just as Nolan suggested. Or human collaborators supplied with Viltrumite technology, Cecil countered. We can't confirm either way yet. Mark studied the map intently. There's a pattern to the targets. They're creating gaps in coverage. Dead zones where normal communications and power won't function. Both Superman and Cecil looked at the boy with surprise. He's right, Superman realized, seeing the pattern now. They're establishing potential staging areas for larger forces. Cecil nodded grimly. Preparing the battlefield. Classic invasion strategy. So what do we do? Mark asked. We respond, Cecil said simply. Show whoever's behind this that Earth isn't defenseless. Superman, I need you visible, help with rescue operations, infrastructure repair, the works. Show the world its greatest defender is on the job. And me? Mark asked eagerly. Cecil and Superman exchanged glances. You stay here, Superman decided. Help analyze incoming data. Your insight on the targeting pattern was valuable, you might spot something else we miss. Mark's face fell. You're sidelining me. After all that training. I'm keeping you safe, Superman corrected. Until we know exactly what we're facing, putting you in the field is an unnecessary risk. But, this isn't a debate, Mark, Superman said firmly. Your safety is non-negotiable. As Superman departed for the nearest impact site, Mark slumped in a chair beside a bank of monitors, frustration evident in every line of his body. Cecil regarded him thoughtfully. He's protecting you because he cares, not because he doesn't trust your abilities. I could help out there, Mark muttered. I'm not a kid anymore. No, Cecil agreed. You're a teenager with godlike strength who's had exactly 1 day of formal training. There's a difference between bravery and recklessness. Mark sighed dramatically, the universal teenage response to adult reasoning. But he turned his attention to the data flowing across the screens, determined to prove his usefulness even from the sidelines. Superman arrived at the Washington, D.C. impact site to find the city's power grid devastated. Emergency services were overwhelmed, fires spreading through government buildings, hospitals operating on failing backup generators. He worked methodically, prioritizing life-saving operations before infrastructure repair. His heat vision welded broken power lines. His freezing breath extinguished fires. His strength lifted collapsed structures off trapped civilians. While restoring power to a critical hospital, he noticed something odd, a flicker of movement too fast for human eyes to track. Someone with superhuman speed observing his activities from a distance. Superman pretended not to notice, continuing his repairs while using his enhanced senses to track the observer. Whoever it was maintained perfect stillness when they thought he wasn't looking, moving only during moments of apparent distraction. Viltrumite tactics, just as Nolan had employed during their early interactions. When the hospital's power was restored, Superman shot skyward without warning, then reversed direction at supersonic speed, attempting to catch the observer by surprise. He succeeded, colliding with a blue and white blur that materialized into a startled Viltrumite female. Impressive reaction time, she commented, recovering quickly and hovering opposite him. Nolan's reports didn't exaggerate your capabilities. Who are you? Superman demanded. My name is Anissa, she replied with military precision. Advanced scout for the Viltrumite Empire. Unlike Nolan, she made no attempt to disguise her purpose or allegiance. Her uniform bore the official insignia of what Superman assumed was the Viltrumite military. The explosions were your doing, Superman stated. A preliminary assessment, Anissa confirmed casually. Measuring your response time, capabilities, and Earth's defensive readiness. Standard procedure. You endangered innocent lives. She shrugged. Casualties were minimal. We're not barbarians, Kryptonian. What do you want? Superman asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. The Empire has claimed Earth as a potential colony world. We're here to prepare it for integration. And if Earth refuses to be integrated? Anissa's expression hardened. Integration isn't optional. The real question is how much of Earth's population survives the process. That largely depends on you. Me. You and the half-breed. Nolan's son. Anissa folded her arms across her chest. The Empire is prepared to offer terms. Stand aside, allow the transition to proceed, and most humans will be spared. Resist, and we'll simply eliminate the obstacles, starting with major population centers. Superman's eyes narrowed. Earth is under my protection. I won't let you or your empire harm these people. I expected as much, Anissa sighed. Kryptonians were always self-righteous. That's why your planet had to be eliminated. The confirmation of Nolan's claim hit Superman like a physical blow. You destroyed Krypton. Not personally, Anissa clarified with cold amusement. But yes, the Empire determined Krypton's scientific advancement had reached a point where they might soon challenge Viltrumite supremacy. Strategic intervention was required. Rage threatened to overwhelm Superman's usually perfect control. His entire world, billions of lives, extinguished as a preventative measure by these self-proclaimed superior beings. "The Empire has made a grave mistake," he said, his voice deadly calm. "If you value your people, you'll leave Earth immediately and never return." Anissa laughed. Bold words from the last of a dead race. "We've studied you, Kal-El. Your power comes from this system's yellow sun, impressive, but not unique. Viltrumite physiology may lack your solar-based abilities, but what we have is far more valuable: numbers. Is that why you've been hiding? Planting sleeper agents instead of facing me directly?" Her amusement faded. "Preparation isn't cowardice, it's strategy. The full Viltrumite delegation will arrive soon enough. This was merely courtesy, a formal notification of Earth's change in status." "And Nolan? Was his capture part of your strategy too?" "Nolan failed his mission," Anissa said dismissively. "His attachment to his human cover identity compromised his effectiveness. His extraction was never a priority." The callous disregard for their own agent told Superman everything he needed to know about Viltrumite values. "I'll only say this once," Superman warned. "Leave Earth in peace, or face the consequences." Anissa's smile returned, cold and confident. "We'll meet again soon, Kryptonian. When the full delegation arrives, you'll have one last chance to make the right choice." She disappeared in a blur of speed, leaving Superman hovering alone above the damaged city, the weight of her revelations pressing down on him like kryptonite. The Viltrumites had destroyed Krypton. And now they wanted Earth. "They're lying," Cecil insisted after Superman reported his encounter with Anissa. "It's psychological warfare. They can't possibly have destroyed Krypton. Why would they lie about something I could potentially disprove?" Superman countered. "It makes more sense as a boast than a bluff." They stood in Cecil's office, reviewing security footage from various explosion sites. Mark had been reluctantly sent home with his mother after analyzing all available data. "Even if it's true," Cecil said, "it changes nothing about our current situation. The threat remains the same." "It changes everything," Superman disagreed. "If they destroyed Krypton, a technologically advanced civilization, Earth stands even less chance against them. We need to accelerate our preparations." Cecil gestured to the screens showing military and technological mobilization worldwide. "What do you think we've been doing for 5 years? The GDA has developed weapons based on your Kryptonian technology, reverse-engineered defensive systems from captured Viltrumite equipment, established planetary defense protocols. It won't be enough," Superman interrupted. "Not against an empire capable of destroying entire worlds." "Then what do you suggest? Surrender?" "Never." Superman's resolve was absolute. "But we need more information. About their capabilities, their weaknesses, their timeline." Cecil's expression turned calculating. "Nolan might know. He hasn't spoken meaningfully in 5 years. What makes you think he'll start now?" "Because now we have leverage," Cecil suggested. "His son." Superman's jaw tightened. "Mark is not a bargaining chip." "Not directly," Cecil clarified. "But Nolan's interest in the boy is genuine, possibly the only genuine attachment he formed on Earth. If Mark approached him, father to son, asking for help protecting Earth." "You want to use Mark to manipulate Nolan," Superman translated, disapproval evident. "I want to save lives," Cecil corrected. "Billions of them. If appealing to whatever remains of Nolan's paternal instinct helps accomplish that, I'll do it without hesitation." Superman paced the office, conflicted. He'd promised to protect Mark, to keep him away from his father's influence. But if Anissa was telling the truth, if the full Viltrumite delegation was approaching. "I need to consult my Fortress database," he decided. There may be Kryptonian records of previous Viltrumite encounters. Something useful. And Mark? Superman sighed. Let him rest tonight. Tomorrow, I'll discuss options with him and Debbie. It has to be their choice, not ours. Cecil nodded, accepting the compromise. Fair enough. But Superman. Time isn't on our side. It never is, Superman replied grimly. Mark couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the map of explosion sites, the pattern of deliberate destruction. His father's words echoed, the Viltrumite Empire will come for Earth eventually. And when they do, they'll expect you to join them. His bedroom in the safe house felt suddenly claustrophobic. With his newly developed powers, he could hear his mother's restless turning in her room down the hall, the GDA agents murmuring on their patrol outside, even the distant sound of highway traffic miles away. He slipped out of bed and opened his window, staring at the night sky. Somewhere up there, an alien empire was planning Earth's conquest. His father's people. His people, genetically at least. The thought terrified and confused him. Where did his loyalties belong? With the human world that raised him? Or with the Viltrumite heritage flowing through his blood? On impulse, Mark launched himself into the air, his flight still slightly awkward but functional. He didn't have a destination in mind, just needed to move, to think, to breathe outside the confines of constant surveillance. He flew aimlessly for nearly an hour before realizing he'd unconsciously navigated toward the GDA containment facility where his father was held. The complex sprawled below, illuminated by security lights, surrounded by multiple perimeters of advanced defensive systems. Mark hovered high above, knowing he should turn back. This was precisely what everyone would warn against, approaching his father without Superman or GDA supervision. But something pulled at him, the need for answers only Nolan could provide. Making a decision that felt simultaneously reckless and inevitable, Mark descended toward the facility, staying in the blind spots between security cameras that he'd memorized from the GDA briefings. His enhanced strength made short work of the maintenance access panel Cecil had once offhandedly mentioned as a design vulnerability. Inside, Mark navigated with instinctive stealth, using his superhearing to avoid guard patrols. The containment section housing his father required biometric access, but the ventilation system proved less secure. Minutes later, he dropped silently into the darkened observation room adjacent to his father's cell. Through the one-way glass, he could see Nolan sitting in perfect stillness, eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation. "I know you're there, Mark," Nolan said without opening his eyes. "Your heartbeat gives you away. Distinctive. Half Viltrumite, half human." Mark stepped closer to the glass, simultaneously unnerved and impressed by his father's sensory perception. "How did you know it was me specifically?" Nolan's eyes opened, focusing unerringly on Mark's position despite the mirrored glass between them. A father knows his son's heartbeat. Even Viltrumite fathers. "I'm not supposed to be here," Mark admitted. "Obviously." A small smile touched Nolan's lips. "Breaking into a high-security government facility. Perhaps you're more like me than you care to admit." "I'm nothing like you," Mark said reflexively, then sighed. I need answers." A Viltrumite named Anissa approached Superman today. "She confirmed what you said about Krypton, about the Empire coming for Earth." Nolan nodded, unsurprised. "Anissa. One of our most dedicated officers. If she's here, the delegation isn't far behind." "How many?" Mark asked. "How many Viltrumites are coming?" "Enough," Nolan replied simply. "The Empire doesn't waste resources. A standard planetary acquisition team would include 10 to 15 warriors, plus support personnel. Warriors capable of destroying planets," Mark said, the magnitude finally sinking in. "Not individually," Nolan clarified. Krypton's destruction was a coordinated operation using technology and strategic strikes against critical planetary systems. The planet's unstable core did most of the work. Mark pressed his palm against the glass. How do we stop them? Nolan raised an eyebrow. You've chosen sides already. This is my home, Mark said firmly. These are my people too. These are your mother's people, Nolan corrected. Your Viltrumite heritage offers you a place of privilege in the New Order. You would be spared, respected, trained in the ways of your true people. While billions die. Mark's voice rose. While Mom becomes what, a pet? A specimen? How can you even suggest that? Nolan stood, approaching the glass until he stood directly opposite his son. Despite the restraints, despite his prison jumpsuit, he radiated authority. Because I understand what you're facing, he said with unexpected gentleness. The Empire cannot be defeated by Earth's current defenses. Not even Superman can stand against the full might of Viltrumite forces. The choice isn't between victory and defeat, Mark. It's between survival with compromise or destruction with defiance. There has to be another way, Mark insisted. Nolan studied his son for a long moment. Perhaps. But finding it would require knowledge of Viltrumite weaknesses that Superman doesn't possess. Do you know their weaknesses? A calculated pause. Every species has vulnerabilities, even one as advanced as Viltrumites. Tell me, Mark urged. Help us protect Earth. Help us protect Mom. Nolan turned away, pacing his cell. Why should I betray my people? What do I gain by helping Earth resist? Your freedom. Mark suggested desperately. I could talk to Superman, to the GDA, my freedom means nothing if the Empire views me as a traitor, Nolan interrupted. The punishment would be far worse than this comfortable cell. Mark felt his hope fading. Then why tell me anything? Why mention weaknesses at all if you won't help? Nolan faced his son again. Because despite everything, you are my son. My blood. And a father should prepare his son for what's coming, even if they stand on opposite sides. I don't understand. You will. Nolan returned to his seat. Go home, Mark. Your mother will be worried. We'll speak again soon. Dad, please, guards will be changing rotation in approximately 2 minutes, Nolan said calmly. If you leave through the ventilation system now, you'll avoid detection. Mark hesitated, torn between pressing for more information and the risk of discovery. Go, Nolan repeated, more forcefully. And Mark, tell Superman that the Scourge virus might interest him. That's all I can offer for now. With no choice but to accept this cryptic offering, Mark retreated the way he'd come, questions multiplying rather than diminishing after the strange encounter. You did what? Superman's expression cycled through shock, disappointment, and concern as Mark confessed his midnight visit to the containment facility. They stood in the Grayson family's kitchen, Debbie listening silently, coffee cup clutched in white-knuckled hands. I had to talk to him, Mark explained. After everything that happened yesterday, I couldn't just sit around waiting. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? Superman demanded. If he'd somehow escaped, he didn't want to escape, Mark interrupted. He could have used me as leverage, as a hostage, but he didn't. He just talked. And told you to ask me about something called the Scourge virus, Superman concluded, troubled. Did he explain what that is? Mark shook his head. Just said it might interest you. Is it familiar? No, Superman admitted. But I can consult the Kryptonian archives at the fortress. Debbie finally spoke, her voice tight with restrained emotion. We need to discuss what happens next. If these Viltrumites are coming, if Earth is truly in danger, I need to know Mark will be safe. Mom, Mark began. No, Mark, she cut him off firmly. I've supported your training with Superman. I've accepted that you have these abilities now. But I'm still your mother, and I will not let you throw yourself into an interplanetary war. What about everyone else's mothers? Mark challenged. Don't they deserve to have their kids protected too? Debbie set down her cup carefully. Of course they do. But you're just one boy. One boy with new powers you barely understand, against an empire that apparently destroys planets when they feel threatened. I'm not suggesting Mark fight, Superman interjected, placing a calming hand on the teenager's shoulder. But his connection to Nolan might be valuable. The information his father shared, however cryptic, could be crucial. So you want to use my son as, what, a messenger between you and his murderous father? Debbie asked incredulously. I want to use every advantage we have, Superman corrected gently. Including Nolan's apparent willingness to communicate with Mark. Debbie turned away, blinking back tears of frustration. This isn't fair. Any of it. No, Superman agreed. It isn't. But it's the reality we're facing. Mark moved to his mother's side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Despite being her son, he now stood several inches taller than her, a physical manifestation of how quickly things were changing. Mom, I can't sit this out, he said softly. Not when I might be able to help. Not when you're in danger too. Debbie looked up at him, seeing the determination in eyes that increasingly reminded her of Nolan's. Promise me you won't do anything reckless. No confronting Viltrumites, no heroics without Superman present. I promise, Mark said, though Superman caught the subtle qualification in his tone, a promise made to ease his mother's fears rather than a commitment to inaction. I'll investigate this scourge virus, Superman decided. Mark, you stay with your mother today. If Nolan's information leads somewhere, we'll discuss next steps then. As Superman departed for his fortress, he couldn't shake a growing sense of dread. The pieces were aligning in ways he hadn't anticipated, Nolan's sudden willingness to share information, Anissa's warning, the strategic attacks. It felt less like preparation for invasion and more like the final moves in a game of chess, pieces positioned, sacrifices calculated, trap about to spring. The Fortress of Solitude's crystalline database contained knowledge spanning the known universe, preserved from Krypton's archives before its destruction. If information about a scourge virus existed anywhere, it would be here. Computer, search all records for reference to the scourge virus in connection with Viltrumite physiology, Superman instructed. The system hummed, crystal matrices glowing as they processed the query. Moments later, results appeared on the main display, a single ancient file, heavily encrypted, stored in the xenobiology section. File located, the computer announced. Kryptonian Science Council Restricted Archive, Classified Security Level Alpha. Biometric authentication required for access. Superman pressed his palm against the crystal interface. Authenticate, Kal-El, House of El, last son of Krypton. The display flickered, then resolved into Kryptonian text and diagrams depicting what appeared to be a microscopic organism. The scourge, Superman read aloud as the translation appeared. Engineered pathogen developed by Kryptonian xenobiologists during the Third Era War with the Viltrumite Empire. Classification, biological deterrent. Target, Viltrumite genetic structure exclusively. His heart raced as he continued reading. According to the file, Kryptonian scientists had discovered a vulnerability in Viltrumite physiology, a specific genetic sequence that, when targeted by a custom-engineered virus, caused catastrophic cellular breakdown in pure Viltrumite biology. The virus had been deployed only once, during a major Viltrumite offensive against Kryptonian colonies. The results had been devastating, hundreds of Viltrumite warriors incapacitated, their vaunted strength and durability undermined by a microscopic enemy they couldn't fight with physical prowess. The Empire had immediately withdrawn all forces, establishing a quarantine zone around affected areas. For centuries afterward, they avoided direct confrontation with Krypton, focusing their expansion in other directions. Until Krypton's destruction. Computer, Superman said, his voice tight with the implications, can this virus be synthesized using Earth technology? Negative, the system replied. Synthesis requires specialized Kryptonian equipment. However, original samples were stored in secure facilities on 3 Kryptonian outposts. All destroyed with Krypton. Unknown. Colonial outpost designations indicate locations beyond Krypton's immediate system. Probability of survival, approximately 37%. Superman stared at the star map showing the possible locations of these outposts, distant, but potentially reachable. Computer, could Viltrumite intelligence have learned about these outposts? Affirmative. Kryptonian colonial records were not classified at the same security level as the virus research. The realization hit Superman like a physical blow. If the Viltrumites knew about Kryptonian outposts that might contain samples of a virus lethal to their kind, they would have targeted those locations for destruction. But if they were still concerned enough to have Nolan mention it now, that suggested uncertainty, they couldn't confirm all samples had been eliminated. Which meant at least one might still exist. Superman's communicator activated, interrupting his thoughts. Cecil's voice came through, tense and urgent. Superman, we have a situation. Multiple atmospheric entry points detected, objects on trajectory for major population centers worldwide. Energy signatures match Viltrumite technology. The delegation, Superman realized. They're here early. Not just early, in force. We're tracking at least 30 distinct objects, significantly more than Nolan indicated would be standard procedure. Superman was already moving toward the fortress exit. I'm on my way to GDA headquarters. Alert Global Defense Forces, activate all countermeasures. Already done, Cecil confirmed. But Superman, there's something else. Nolan's gone. What? How? Security footage shows nothing. One moment he was in his cell, the next, empty. No alarms triggered, no barriers breached. It's like he simply phased through the walls. Superman's mind raced. Anissa. She must have technology we haven't encountered before. Some kind of targeted teleportation or phasing device. Whatever it was, the timing can't be coincidence, Cecil said grimly. With the delegation arriving and Nolan extracted, we have to assume full invasion protocols are active. What about Mark and Debbie? Secure for now. I've doubled their protective detail and moved them to an underground facility. Small comfort, but better than nothing. I'll be there in minutes. As Superman streaked through the sky toward GDA headquarters, pieces clicked into place. Nolan's mention of the Scourge virus hadn't been helpful information, it had been intelligence gathering, confirming whether Superman knew about the Viltrumites' greatest vulnerability. And now they were coming in overwhelming force, earlier than announced, with Nolan back in their ranks. Whatever advantage Earth might have had was rapidly disappearing. The GDA command center had transformed into a global defense hub, with military leaders from major world powers coordinating via secure channels as tracking systems monitored the approaching Viltrumite vessels. Impact predictions? Superman asked as he joined Cecil at the central console. First wave in 12 minutes, Cecil replied. Major metropolitan areas, New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing, Los Angeles. Designed for maximum psychological impact, Superman noted. Classic show of force. Can you intercept them before they reach population centers? Superman studied the trajectory data. Some, not all. They've timed their approach to ensure simultaneous arrival across all targets. Then we prioritize, Cecil decided. You take the highest population density targets. Our experimental interceptors will handle the others. Those interceptors haven't been fully tested, Superman cautioned. No time like the present, Cecil replied with grim humor. The President has authorized full deployment of all anti-Viltrumite weapons systems. If this is the invasion, we're not holding anything back. Superman nodded, then turned to the assembled military and intelligence leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're facing is an extraterrestrial force with capabilities far beyond conventional threats. Individual Viltrumites possess strength comparable to mine, along with flight, enhanced senses, and near invulnerability to conventional weapons. Can they be killed? asked the Russian general bluntly. Yes, Superman confirmed. But it requires specialized weapons or extreme force. Your standard military equipment will be ineffective. Then what do you suggest? Asked the British representative. Evacuation and containment, Superman replied. Get civilians clear of projected landing zones. Deploy only the specialized weapons the GDA has provided. And most importantly, do not engage in direct combat unless absolutely necessary. The Chinese military commander frowned. You're asking us to abandon our sovereign territory to alien invaders? I'm asking you to preserve your forces for battles they can win, Superman corrected. This first wave will be a demonstration of power, Viltrumite psychology values displays of strength. Let me absorb that initial display while your forces secure civilian populations. Cecil backed him up. Superman's assessment aligns with our intelligence on Viltrumite tactics. This isn't surrender, it's strategic positioning for a longer conflict. The military leaders exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable but recognizing the wisdom in the approach. 5 minutes to first impact, announced the tracking officer. Superman turned to Cecil. I need to go. Keep monitoring all channels, and... He hesitated. Keep Mark safe. If I don't return, you'll return, Cecil interrupted firmly. With a nod of appreciation, Superman departed, accelerating to maximum speed as he headed toward the first projected impact site, New York City. Mark paced the underground bunker, monitoring emergency broadcasts on multiple screens. His mother sat nearby, outwardly calm but radiating tension. They should have let me go with him, Mark muttered for the third time. I could help. Against warriors with thousands of years of combat experience. Debbie countered. You've had your powers for what, a week? Better than sitting here doing nothing, Mark retorted, then immediately regretted his tone. Sorry, Mom. I'm just, frustrated. Debbie's expression softened. I know, honey. This isn't easy for any of us. The main screen switched to live coverage from New York, where a glowing object streaked across the sky. The camera zoomed in to show Superman intercepting it mid-descent, engaging with whatever, or whoever, was inside. He's actually doing it, Mark breathed, watching Superman grapple with what appeared to be a Viltrumite landing craft. He's stopping them. The battle moved too quickly for the cameras to follow clearly, blurs of motion, shockwaves that shattered windows across Manhattan, flashes of heat vision countered by pure physical force. Then the feed cut out abruptly. What happened? Debbie asked, alarmed. Before Mark could respond, the bunker door opened, admitting a GDA agent. Mrs. Grayson, Mark, we have a situation. We need to move you to a more secure location. What's happening? Mark demanded. Where's Superman? The agent's expression remained professionally neutral. I'm not authorized to provide tactical updates. Please gather your essentials. We leave in 5 minutes. Mark's enhanced hearing picked up what the agent's earpiece was receiving, fragments of panicked reports, multiple breaches, defensive lines collapsed, casualties mounting. They're losing, Mark realized aloud. Mark, his mother warned, seeing the look in his eyes. I have to help, he insisted. I can't hide while people die. You promised, Debbie reminded him, gripping his arm. You promised you wouldn't do anything reckless. Mark covered her hand with his own. I promised I wouldn't confront Viltrumites without Superman. But Superman needs help now, Mom. I can feel it. The agent stepped forward. Young man, my orders are explicit, you are to remain in protective custody at all times. I'm sorry, Mark said sincerely. But I can't follow those orders. Before either his mother or the agent could react, Mark moved with superhuman speed, disarming the agent and binding his hands with his own belt in one fluid motion. Mark! Debbie cried, torn between pride and terror. I'll be careful, he promised. But I have to try. He hugged her fiercely, then turned to the bound agent. "Take care of my mom. Please." Without waiting for a response, Mark raced through the bunker door, accelerating to flight speed as soon as he reached open air. His trajectory, New York City, where the last images had shown Superman facing overwhelming odds. The battle was not going well. Superman had intercepted the first Viltrumite vessel successfully, engaging its occupant, a warrior named Thrag, according to his introduction before the fighting began, in combat above Manhattan. But while Superman held his own initially, the arrival of 3 more Viltrumites had turned the tide rapidly. Now, battered and bleeding, Superman found himself pinned to the ground in Central Park, surrounded by 4 Viltrumite warriors in pristine white and blue uniforms. Nearby, civilians fled in terror as buildings crumbled from the battle's collateral damage. "Impressive resistance," said Thrag, the apparent leader, his mustache and imperial bearing reminiscent of Nolan. "But ultimately futile. Surrender now, and we'll minimize civilian casualties." "You're lying," Superman coughed, spitting blood. "I know what the Empire did to Krypton." Thrag raised an eyebrow. "Ah, so Anissa delivered our message. Good. Then you understand the consequences of continued defiance." "I understand that Earth won't fall as easily as you think," Superman retorted, gathering his strength for another effort. Thrag signaled to his companions, who gripped Superman's arms, immobilizing him. "Your courage is admirable, Kryptonian. But this display of force is merely the beginning. Our full armada approaches, hundreds of warriors, not just the few you see before you." Superman's eyes widened. "Hundreds?" Nolan indicated. "Nolan Grayson provided information we allowed him to provide," Thrag interrupted. "His usefulness ended long ago, but his connection to the half-breed made him worth preserving. Speaking of which..." He activated a communication device on his wrist. "Status of the half-breed acquisition." A voice responded, "Target has left containment. Tracking now." Thrag smiled coldly at Superman. "Your young protege will be joining us soon. His Viltrumite heritage makes him valuable, despite the human contamination." Rage gave Superman a surge of strength. He broke one arm free, landing a devastating punch that sent one Viltrumite warrior flying backward through several buildings. The others tightened their grip, forcing him back to his knees. "Defiant to the end," Thrag observed. "But the outcome is inevitable. Earth will join the Empire, with or without your cooperation." A blur of motion interrupted the confrontation, something moving fast enough to catch even the Viltrumites by surprise. One of Superman's captors was suddenly airborne, propelled by a perfect flying kick to the jaw. Mark Grayson hovered above them, breathing hard but determined. "Get away from him," he ordered, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Thrag's expression registered genuine surprise before settling into calculated assessment. "The half-breed arrives sooner than expected. Nolan's son, I presume." "Mark, run!" Superman shouted. "You can't fight them." "I'm not leaving you," Mark replied, dropping into a fighting stance Superman had taught him just days earlier. The remaining Viltrumite holding Superman chuckled. "The cub thinks he's a lion. Shall I teach him his place, Thrag?" "No," Thrag ordered. "The boy has potential. Restrain him, don't harm him." The warrior released Superman, who collapsed momentarily, and launched toward Mark with blinding speed. Mark reacted on instinct, dodging the initial grab and countering with a punch that should have been devastating, but merely caused the Viltrumite to pause momentarily. Some strength, the warrior acknowledged. But untrained. Undisciplined. What followed was less a fight than a lesson in humility. The Viltrumite toyed with Mark, allowing him to land ineffectual blows while demonstrating the gulf between his nascent abilities and full Viltrumite power. Superman struggled to rise, to help, but Thrag kept him pinned effortlessly. "Watch," the Viltrumite leader commanded. "See how easily even a child of your world falls before our might." The warrior finally tired of the game, catching Mark's fist mid-swing and twisting his arm behind his back in a painful lock. "Enough playing," Thrag ordered. "Secure the boy. We'll begin his re-education immediately." "I don't think so," came a new voice, familiar, authoritative. Nolan Grayson descended from the sky, his prison jumpsuit replaced with a fresh Viltrumite uniform. Unlike the others, his bore no rank insignia or empire symbols. "Father." Mark gasped, still struggling against his captor. Thrag turned to face the newcomer. "Nolan. Your timing is convenient." "Release my son," Nolan said flatly. A tense silence followed, charged with unspoken dynamics. "Your son," Thrag repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, I suppose he is. Your half-breed experiment. I've always wondered what you hope to prove with this breeding project." "I don't answer to you, Thrag," Nolan replied coldly. "No," Thrag agreed. "You answer to the Empire. An empire you failed when you allowed this Kryptonian to capture you, when you failed to eliminate Earth's defenders as ordered." Mark's eyes widened, darting between his father and Superman, pieces clicking into place. Nolan ignored Thrag's accusations, addressing the warrior holding Mark. "Craig, release him. Now." Surprisingly, the warrior, Craig, hesitated, then complied, shoving Mark roughly away. "Thank you," Nolan said with formal courtesy before turning back to Thrag. "I'd like a private word with my son before proceedings continue." Thrag's eyes narrowed. "We're in the middle of a planetary acquisition, Nolan. This isn't the time for family reunions." "It will only take a moment," Nolan insisted. "Consider it my request after 5 years of imprisonment." Thrag studied him suspiciously, then nodded. "Very well. 1 minute. Craig, maintain position. If either attempts to flee, intercept." Nolan guided Mark a short distance away, just far enough for privacy while remaining visible to the other Viltrumites. "Dad," Mark began, confusion evident in his voice. "What's happening? Are you with them now?" "Listen carefully," Nolan said softly. "We don't have much time. Thrag suspects my loyalty is compromised, and he's right." Mark blinked in surprise. "What?" "The years with your mother, with you, they changed me, Mark. Not enough to betray my people entirely, but enough to question our methods." Nolan's voice remained low, his expression neutral to avoid arousing Thrag's suspicion. "I don't want Earth destroyed. I don't want you forced into service. Then help us fight," Mark urged. "You, me, Superman, we could die gloriously but futilely," Nolan interrupted. Thrag wasn't lying about the Armada. Hundreds of warriors, Mark. Full invasion force. More than even Superman could handle. "Then what's your plan?" Nolan glanced toward Superman, still pinned by Thrag. "The Kryptonian mentioned the Scourge virus?" "He hasn't had time to tell me anything," Mark admitted. "He went straight from the fortress to intercepting your ships." Nolan nodded thoughtfully. "Then listen carefully. There's a Kryptonian outpost in the Andromeda Galaxy, coordinates memorized by every Viltrumite commander as locations to avoid. Superman would know how to find it from his fortress database." "What's there?" "Our one vulnerability," Nolan said simply. "A biological weapon engineered specifically for Viltrumite physiology. The Empire believes all samples were destroyed with Krypton, but intelligence suggests one outpost may have survived." Mark's mind raced. "That's why you mentioned it to me. So Superman would research it?" "And confirm my suspicion that he was unaware of its existence," Nolan admitted. "I needed to know what we were dealing with before making any moves." "Our minute's almost up," Mark noted, seeing Thrag's impatient expression. "One last thing," Nolan said urgently. "Your mixed heritage might provide immunity to the virus. If Superman can retrieve it, you might be the only one who can deploy it safely." "Me? But I don't know the first thing about." "Time's up," Nolan interrupted as Thrag approached. Remember what I said, son. And know that whatever happens next, I'm proud of who you've become. Before Mark could respond, Nolan turned to face Thrag. He's agreed to cooperate. The boy understands the realities of the situation. Thrag looked skeptical. Has he? Then perhaps a demonstration of loyalty is in order. He gestured to Superman. Kill the Kryptonian, boy. Prove your Viltrumite heritage worthy of recognition. Mark froze, looking between Superman, Thrag, and his father in horror. That's unnecessary, Nolan objected. He's just a boy, barely into his powers. All the more reason to begin his proper education, Thrag countered. A first kill shapes character, wouldn't you agree? Mark stepped back. I won't do it. Thrag's expression hardened. Then you've chosen your side. He turned to Craig. Kill the Kryptonian. Then secure the half-breed for rehabilitation. What happened next occurred so quickly that even Viltrumite's senses struggled to process it. Nolan moved, not toward Mark or Superman, but directly at Thrag, catching the Viltrumite leader in a surprise attack that sent both crashing through the ground into the subway system below. Simultaneously, Superman summoned his remaining strength, breaking Craig's hold and shouting to Mark, "Fly! Now!" Mark hesitated only a second before launching upward, Superman following despite his injuries. Below, chaos erupted as Thrag and Nolan engaged in a brutal confrontation, concrete and steel shattering around them. What about my dad? Mark called as they accelerated away from the battle. He's buying us time, Superman replied grimly. We can't waste it. They flew north at supersonic speed, Superman pushing through his injuries with pure willpower. Where are we going? Mark asked. The fortress, Superman answered. Your father was right about one thing, there's a weapon that might stop the invasion. But retrieving it won't be easy. The Scourge virus, Mark said. Dad told me about it. Said I might be immune because of my mixed heritage. Superman nodded. That's the theory. But reaching the outpost, securing the sample, and returning before the full armada arrives, that's the challenge. How far is this outpost? Andromeda Galaxy. With my fastest ship, approximately 3 days' travel. Mark did the math. And the armada? Based on Thrag's statements, less than a week away, Superman confirmed. It will be close. Below them, the Arctic landscape appeared, the crystalline structures of the fortress gleaming in the distance. What about everyone here? Mark asked. My mom, the cities they're attacking, we can't just leave Earth defenseless. We won't, Superman promised. The GDA has weapons that can slow the Viltrumites, not defeat them but buy time. And... He hesitated. And what? And I'm not going, Superman decided. You are. Mark nearly fell from the sky in shock. What? Me? Alone? It has to be you, Superman explained as they landed at the fortress entrance. Earth needs a defender while you're gone. Someone to coordinate resistance, to keep fighting until you return with the virus. But I barely know how to fly straight. Mark protested. I can't pilot an alien spacecraft across galaxies. The ship will be programmed with the coordinates. It's designed for a single pilot with minimal training. Superman placed his hands on Mark's shoulders. You can do this, Mark. You have to do this. Mark stared at Superman, the weight of responsibility threatening to crush him. What if I fail? What if the virus isn't there, or I can't get back in time? Superman's expression was solemn but determined. Then we fight to the last. But Earth will fall without that virus, Mark. You're our best hope. As they entered the fortress, alarms began blaring, proximity warnings. The crystalline displays showed multiple Viltrumite signatures approaching rapidly. They've tracked us, Superman realized. We don't have much time. He moved with urgency through the fortress, leading Mark to a hangar area containing several spacecraft of Kryptonian design. The smallest, a sleek vessel clearly built for speed, powered up at Superman's command. This is the Scout, he explained, quickly demonstrating the basic controls. Kryptonian navigation systems, automated life support, and faster-than-light capabilities beyond anything Earth has developed. It will get you there and back. Mark stared at the spacecraft, overwhelmed. This is insane. I'm 17. I should be worrying about college applications, not interstellar missions. Mark, Superman said gently, I know this is asking more than anyone should ask of someone your age. But sometimes the universe doesn't care about what's fair. Sometimes it just demands what's necessary. The proximity alarms grew more urgent. On the monitors, they could see Viltrumite warriors, not Thrag or Nolan, but others, approaching the fortress perimeter. Your father is fighting his own people to give us this chance, Superman reminded him. Don't let that sacrifice be in vain. Mark took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders in a gesture unconsciously mirroring both his father and Superman. What about Mom? I can't just disappear into space without telling her. I'll protect her, Superman promised. With everything I have. The fortress shuddered as the first Viltrumite impact struck its outer defenses. Time's up, Superman said, opening the Scout's hatch. The ship's computer has all the information you'll need, coordinates, extraction protocols, everything. Follow its guidance. Mark climbed into the pilot's seat, heart pounding as the ship's systems activated around him. Superman, he called as the hatch began to close, what if the virus affects me too? Dad wasn't sure about my immunity. Then make sure Earth was worth the sacrifice, Superman replied, determination blazing in his eyes as he turned to face the approaching threat. Now go. The Scout's engines ignited, the fortress hangar doors opening to reveal the polar sky. As the ship accelerated upward, Mark caught a final glimpse of Superman standing defiantly at the fortress entrance, heat vision blazing as the first Viltrumites breached the outer defenses. Then Earth fell away, the atmosphere giving way to the star-filled void, and Mark Grayson, teenager, half-Viltrumite, reluctant hero, began the most important journey of his young life. Behind him, the fate of a planet hung in the balance. Ahead, an ancient weapon that might save it, or doom him. No pressure. Chapter 3, Worlds Collide. The vastness of space should have been terrifying. Mark Grayson had never left Earth's atmosphere before, never mind piloting an alien spacecraft toward another galaxy. Yet as the Scout's engines propelled him deeper into the void, what terrified him most wasn't the endless darkness surrounding him, but what he'd left behind. Superman facing down Viltrumite warriors at the fortress. His father battling Thrag beneath New York City. His mother waiting in a bunker, not knowing if she'd ever see him again. Earth, his home, facing an invasion force capable of destroying entire civilizations. Autopilot engaged, announced the ship's computer in a calm, vaguely female voice. Course set for Kryptonian Outpost Zeta 9, Andromeda Galaxy. Estimated arrival, 72 hours, 17 minutes. 3 days, Mark muttered, staring at the navigation display showing Earth shrinking behind him. Anything can happen in 3 days. Would you like me to initiate sleep cycle protocols? The computer offered. Kryptonian vessels are equipped with suspended animation capabilities for long journeys. The thought of sleeping through this crisis made Mark's stomach turn. No. I need to stay alert. Understood. Recreational and educational programs are available. Would you prefer, what I prefer, Mark interrupted, is information about where we're going. What can you tell me about this outpost? The main display shifted to show a rotating image of a small planetoid surrounded by what appeared to be artificial structures. Outpost Zeta 9 was established during Krypton's third expansion period, approximately 1,200 Earth years ago, the computer explained. Primary function, xenobiological research facility with specialized containment systems. Status, unknown since Krypton's destruction. And the Scourge virus? What exactly is it, and how does it work? Another display activated, showing microscopic organisms attacking what Mark assumed were Viltrumite cells. The Scourge virus is a genetically engineered pathogen developed by Kryptonian scientists during the Krypton-Viltrumite conflict. It targets specific genetic sequences unique to pure Viltrumite biology, causing rapid cellular deterioration. Effectiveness: 97% mortality rate among exposed pure-blooded Viltrumites. Mark swallowed hard. And what about half Viltrumites? Like me? A brief pause. Insufficient data. Theoretical models suggest reduced susceptibility due to genetic diversity, but no documented cases exist. So he might be immune, or he might be sentencing himself to death by retrieving this weapon. Great. Mark leaned back in the pilot's chair, watching stars streak past as the scout accelerated to faster-than-light speed. He'd never felt so alone, or so burdened with responsibility. His thoughts drifted to his father, the man who'd raised him, the murderer of Earth's heroes, and now, inexplicably, their potential savior. What had changed Nolan? Was it genuine concern for Earth, for Debbie, for Mark himself? Or just another layer of manipulation? Computer, can you establish communication with Earth? Negative. Current faster-than-light trajectory prevents real-time communication. Messages can be recorded for delayed transmission once we return to sublight speed. Mark sighed. Complete isolation, then. Just him and his thoughts for 3 days while the fate of his world hung in the balance. No pressure at all. Superman crashed through 3 floors of the fortress before managing to halt his momentum. Above him, Viltrumite warriors poured through the breach they'd created, systematically destroying the structure's defenses. He'd counted 7 distinct attackers, not Thrag or the original landing team, but a secondary force dispatched to capture him and prevent Mark's departure. The scout had successfully escaped, launching into space minutes earlier, but now Superman faced the consequences of that small victory. Pulling himself from the rubble, he activated the fortress's final defensive protocol. Computer, initiate Phantom Protocol. Authorization, Kal-El, House of El. Warning, responded the system. Phantom Protocol will render the fortress dimensionally unstable. Recovery probability, 23%. Understood. Execute now. The crystalline structures throughout the fortress began to shimmer, reality itself seeming to waver around them. The approaching Viltrumites hesitated, sensing something unusual. What trickery is this, Kryptonian? Demanded their leader, a female warrior whose insignia identified her as a commander. Superman smiled grimly. A little something from the Phantom Zone Research Division. The air rippled as localized dimensional portals opened throughout the fortress, not to the Phantom Zone itself, but to a buffer dimension that would temporarily phase the entire structure out of normal spacetime. Anyone inside would be trapped in dimensional suspension for hours, maybe days. Including Superman himself. Retreat, the commander ordered, recognizing the danger too late. Superman launched himself at the group, preventing their escape. If I'm going, you're coming with me. The dimensional shift accelerated, reality blurring around them. Some Viltrumites managed to break free, fleeing through the damaged ceiling, but Superman successfully entangled himself with 3 others as the Phantom Protocol reached critical threshold. The last thing he saw before reality phased out was the Arctic sky above, and a distant streak marking the scout's departure from Earth. Good luck, Mark, he thought as dimensional energy enveloped him. Make it count. Cecil Stedman had seen his share of crises during his tenure as director of the Global Defense Agency. Alien invasions, superhuman conflicts, dimensional incursions, all documented in classified files meters thick. None compared to this. Status report, he demanded, striding through the GDA's Emergency Command Center. Viltrumite forces have established beachheads in 17 major cities, reported his chief analyst. New York, Moscow, Tokyo, and London have sustained catastrophic damage. Superman was last detected at his Arctic facility before all signals went dark. And our defensive measures? Anti-Viltrumite weaponry deployed in Washington, Beijing, and Berlin has shown limited effectiveness, enough to drive the attackers back temporarily, but not to neutralize them permanently. Cecil processed this grimly. Casualty estimates? The analyst hesitated. Preliminary figures suggest over 30,000 civilian casualties worldwide, with infrastructure damage in the trillions. And this was just the advance force. The main armada was still days away. What about Omni-Man and Thrag? Satellite imagery lost track of them after they went underground in New York. The battle appears to have continued beneath the city. We've recorded seismic events consistent with superhuman combat throughout the Manhattan subway system. Cecil's attention shifted to a secure monitor showing a subterranean bunker. And Mrs. Grayson? Secure, but agitated. She's demanding information about her son. Cecil sighed. He owed Debbie Grayson the truth, however difficult. Connect me to her bunker. Moments later, Debbie's face appeared on the screen, tension evident in every line of her expression. Cecil, what's happening? Where's Mark? Cecil considered his words carefully. Mark is on a mission, Debbie. A critical mission that could turn the tide of this invasion. What kind of mission? She demanded. He's 17, for God's sake. He barely knows how to use his powers. I know, Cecil acknowledged. But circumstances have forced our hand. Superman has sent him to retrieve something that might stop the Viltrumites. Debbie's eyes widened in understanding. You've sent my son into space. Alone. It was Superman's decision, but yes. Mark is currently en route to a Kryptonian outpost that may contain a weapon specifically effective against Viltrumites. And Nolan? What about Mark's father? Cecil hesitated. Nolan appears to have turned against the Viltrumite leadership. Last confirmed sighting showed him engaging their commander in combat. Debbie sat down heavily, emotions warring across her face. He's protecting Mark, she said quietly, more to herself than Cecil. After everything, he's still protecting our son. So it seems, Cecil agreed cautiously. Though his true motivations remain unclear. A bitter laugh escaped Debbie. 5 years I've hated him for what he did, for the lies. Now I don't know what to feel. Focus on Mark, Cecil advised. Your son has shown extraordinary courage. He may well save us all. Debbie straightened, maternal pride momentarily overcoming her fear. How long until he returns? Approximately 6 days round trip, if all goes according to plan. And how long until the main Viltrumite force arrives? Cecil couldn't shield her from this reality. 5 days, by our best estimates. The implication hung between them. Earth would face the full might of the Viltrumite armada before Mark could return with the virus. Then we better make sure there's still a planet here when he gets back, Debbie said with surprising resolve. What can I do to help? Mark's first day aboard the Scout passed in a haze of anxiety and information overload. The ship's computer contained extensive files on Kryptonian history, technology, and, most relevant to his mission, everything known about Viltrumite biology. He learned that Viltrumites, despite their apparent invulnerability, possessed several weaknesses. High-frequency sonic attacks could disrupt their inner ear, causing disorientation. Certain radiation frequencies penetrated their otherwise impervious skin. And most importantly, their genetic structure, while incredibly stable, had specific sequences vulnerable to targeted biological agents. Like the Scourge virus. Computer, show me Viltrumite Empire history, Mark requested, trying to understand the civilization his father had served. Images appeared on the main display, a planet called Viltrum, technological advancement, and eventually, imperial expansion across galaxies. Viltrumite society was originally structured around intellectual and scientific achievement, the computer narrated. Approximately 3,000 Earth years ago, a philosophical shift occurred. Strength became the dominant cultural value, leading to internal purges of weaker elements and eventually, external conquest. Mark frowned. Purges? They killed their own people. Affirmative. Historical estimates suggest nearly half of Viltrum's population was eliminated during what Viltrumite records call the purification, a period when those deemed physically or ideologically inferior were systematically eradicated. The display showed disturbing images of what appeared to be mass executions, Viltrumites killing other Viltrumites in some twisted form of natural selection. "This is what my father comes from," Mark whispered, horrified. "What part of me comes from?" It is worth noting, the computer added, that Kryptonian intelligence indicated some Viltrumite dissenters escaped the purges, establishing hidden colonies beyond Empire control. Their subsequent fate is unknown. A small comfort, but Mark clung to it, the idea that not all Viltrumites embraced the Empire's brutality. That perhaps there was more to his heritage than conquest and violence. His thoughts were interrupted by an alert from the navigation system. "Warning, unidentified vessel detected on intercept course. Classification, unknown. Origin, likely Viltrumite." Mark's heart raced. "They're following me. How is that possible? Tracking methods undetermined. Intercept projected in 47 minutes if current course is maintained. Can we go faster?" Mark asked desperately. "Negative. Current velocity represents maximum sustainable faster-than-light travel for this vessel." Mark considered his options. He couldn't outrun the pursuit, couldn't hide in the vastness of space, and certainly couldn't win a fight against experienced Viltrumite warriors. "Computer, are there any planetary systems nearby where we could?" "I don't know, lose them somehow." Affirmative. Binary star system designated KR 2817 contains an asteroid field with significant electromagnetic interference. Pursuing vessel may experience tracking difficulties in such conditions. "Set course for this system," Mark ordered. "And prepare defensive systems, whatever this ship has." Adjusting course. Scout-class vessels are equipped with minimal defensive capabilities. Primary design focus is speed and stealth, not combat. Perfect. He was flying a space sports car in a universe of tanks. Mark watched anxiously as the navigation display updated, showing their new trajectory toward the binary star system. The pursuing vessel adjusted course almost immediately, maintaining intercept. "Whoever's flying that ship knows what they're doing," Mark muttered. For the next hour, Mark studied the scout systems frantically, looking for anything that might help him evade or defend against his pursuers. The ship had basic energy shields, a small pulse weapon designed more for clearing space debris than combat, and stealth technology that was evidently failing against Viltrumite tracking methods. Entering KR 2817 system, the computer announced. "Asteroid field density, high. Warning, navigational hazards present." "Take us in," Mark instructed. "As deep into the field as safely possible." The scout decelerated from faster-than-light travel, the stars cape normalizing around them as they approached a breathtaking sight, two massive stars orbiting each other, their gravitational dance creating a chaotic field of asteroids ranging from boulder size to dwarf planet dimensions. Pursuing vessel maintaining intercept. Current distance, 340,000 kilometers and closing. Mark made a decision. "Computer, transfer helm control to manual." Warning, manual navigation through asteroid fields requires extensive training and override. "Give me control now." The helm controls activated under Mark's hands. He had zero experience piloting spacecraft, but he did have Viltrumite reflexes and instincts. It would have to be enough. The scout dove into the asteroid field, narrowly avoiding collisions as Mark guided it on an increasingly erratic path. Behind them, the pursuing vessel followed, maintaining a professional distance but clearly operated by someone equally skilled. "Who are you?" Mark wondered aloud, executing a tight maneuver between two massive rotating asteroids. "And how are you tracking me?" An alert sounded. Pursuing vessel has activated weapons systems. Before Mark could react, energy blasts streaked past the scout, impacting asteroids ahead and creating a dangerous field of debris in their path. They're not trying to hit us, Mark realized. They're hurting us. He yanked the controls, sending the scout into a steep climb away from the artificial debris field, only to find another volley of energy blasts creating a similar blockade above. Caught in a three-dimensional trap, Mark's options narrowed rapidly. The pursuing ship was methodically eliminating escape routes, driving the scout toward what appeared to be a massive asteroid at the field center. Computer, what's that large object they're pushing us toward? Celestial body classified as a dwarf planet. Composition, primarily ice and silicates. Surface gravity, 0.15 Earth standard. Atmosphere, none. In other words, a giant rock where he'd be trapped with nowhere to run. Mark's mind raced through possibilities. He couldn't outmaneuver his pursuer. Couldn't outfight them. But maybe. Computer, does this ship have an EVA suit? Affirmative. One standard Kryptonian environmental suit located in rear storage compartment. And can the autopilot navigate to the outpost without me? Affirmative, though without organic decision-making capabilities, success probability decreases by 43%. Not great odds, but better than being captured. Here's what we're going to do, Mark said, formulating his plan as he spoke. Set the autopilot to continue toward the dwarf planet as if complying with their herding. Once we're within 500 kilometers, execute a pre-programmed sequence, full reverse engines, then immediate maximum acceleration on a vector I'll specify. Such maneuvers risk structural integrity at close planetary approach. That's the idea, Mark confirmed grimly. I'll be outside the ship by then. He quickly programmed the escape vector, a tight slingshot around the dwarf planet's gravity well that would fling the empty scout in a completely new direction while, hopefully, distracting his pursuer long enough for Mark to remain undetected. The Kryptonian EVA suit fit remarkably well, adjusting to his proportions automatically. Its systems were intuitive: oxygen supply, thermal regulation, and most importantly, limited propulsion capability. Approaching program transition point, the computer warned as Mark stood in the airlock. 500 kilometers in 30 seconds. Execute sequence on my mark, Mark instructed, heart pounding inside his helmet. And computer, thanks for your help. Gratitude is unnecessary but acknowledged. Good luck, Mark Grayson. The airlock opened, exposing Mark to the vacuum of space. Despite his Viltrumite physiology, he needed the suit's protection against the absolute zero temperatures and lack of oxygen. He pushed off gently, drifting away from the scout as it continued its programmed approach to the dwarf planet. The pursuing vessel maintained position several kilometers back, weapons still charged but not firing. Mark, he whispered to himself, floating in the void. Now. The scout's engines flared brilliantly, first reversing thrust in a deceleration so violent it would have crushed any occupants, then immediately accelerating at maximum power along the pre-programmed escape vector. The pursuing vessel reacted instantly, accelerating to intercept the suddenly erratic Kryptonian craft. Neither ship appeared to notice the small suited figure drifting slowly toward the dwarf planet's dark surface. Mark watched his plan unfold with equal parts relief and dread. The scout successfully executed its slingshot maneuver, disappearing into the asteroid field with the Viltrumite vessel in hot pursuit. His distraction had worked, but now he was stranded on a barren rock in a distant star system with limited oxygen and no transportation. Some plans had more steps than others. This one had exactly one: survive until he could figure out step 2. Mark activated the suit's propulsion, guiding himself toward the dwarf planet's surface. Its weak gravity would make movement easy, at least, though the lack of atmosphere meant absolute silence except for his own breathing inside the helmet. As he descended, something caught his attention, a reflection that seemed out of place on the otherwise matte surface of the celestial body. Using the suit's enhanced visual settings, he magnified the anomaly. No way, he breathed. There, partially embedded in ice and regolith, sat an artificial structure. Not Kryptonian design, the architecture was unfamiliar, more organic in its flowing lines. A crashed ship, perhaps, or some kind of outpost. Mark adjusted his trajectory, propelling himself toward the mysterious structure. If nothing else, it might provide shelter while he figured out how to complete his mission without a spaceship. The structure grew larger as he approached, definitely a vessel of some kind, approximately the size of a small house, its hull breached in multiple locations from what appeared to be a violent impact with the dwarf planet's surface. Mark landed gently beside what looked like an airlock, his boots connecting with the alien metal with a muffled thud he felt rather than heard through the vacuum. The ship's design was elegant, almost artistic, with sweeping curves and what appeared to be observation windows now cracked and frosted over. "Hello?" he called uselessly, his voice confined to his helmet. "Anyone home?" The airlock mechanism was damaged but not destroyed. Using his Viltrumite strength, Mark carefully forced the outer door open, slipping into a small decompression chamber. The inner door proved more cooperative, sliding open at his touch to reveal the ship's interior. Emergency lighting cast an eerie blue glow throughout the cabin. The air was stale but breathable according to his suit's sensors, suggesting the vessel's life support systems remained partially functional despite the crash. Mark removed his helmet cautiously, blinking as his eyes adjusted to the dim illumination. The ship's interior matched its external aesthetics, flowing lines, organic-seeming controls, comfortable accommodations designed for bipedal occupants approximately human-sized. "Whose ship is this?" he wondered aloud, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. A soft chime answered him, followed by a holographic display activating in the center of the cabin. Alien script scrolled across the projection, incomprehensible to Mark. I don't understand," he said, gesturing helplessly at the text. The display paused, then reconfigured into a simple universal translator interface, pictographs and basic mathematical symbols common to most advanced civilizations. Mark smiled despite his situation. "Smart system. Can you tell me what happened here? Who this ship belongs to?" The translator processed his request, displaying a series of images: a planet, a vessel similar to this one but much larger, conflict represented by stylized explosions, and finally, this smaller craft escaping before crash landing on the dwarf planet. "You crashed here while escaping something," Mark interpreted. "But who are you? Who built this ship?" More symbols appeared, culminating in an image that made Mark's breath catch, a stylized representation of what appeared to be a Viltrumite, but with subtle differences in the uniform design and physical characteristics. "Viltrumite?" Mark asked, pointing to the image. "But different somehow?" The system's response was immediate and emphatic. The Viltrumite image appeared, then was crossed out forcefully, followed by new symbols Mark couldn't interpret. "Not Viltrumite," he guessed. "But similar?" An affirmative chime. Mark's mind raced, remembering what the scout's computer had mentioned about Viltrumite dissenters who escaped the purges. Were you running from the Viltrumite Empire?" he asked. The affirmative response came with additional imagery, the larger vessel under attack by ships bearing unmistakable Viltrumite insignia. "You're refugees," Mark realized. "Escapees from Viltrumite control." Before the system could respond, a mechanical door at the rear of the cabin slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond. Mark tensed, prepared for confrontation, but no attack came. Instead, the holographic interface projected an arrow indicating he should proceed down the corridor. "You want me to go that way?" Mark confirmed, receiving another affirmative chime. His Viltrumite instincts warned of potential danger, but his human curiosity won out. Cautiously, Mark followed the indicated path, moving deeper into the crashed vessel until he reached what appeared to be a medical bay. Inside, he found stasis pods, 5 of them arranged around a central control console. 4 pods showed no signs of activity, their transparent covers frosted over and dark. But the 5th hummed with power, its occupant visible through the clear top section. Mark approached carefully, wiping condensation from the pod's surface to reveal its occupant, a female who appeared remarkably similar to a Viltrumite in physical structure, though with distinctly blue-tinted skin and more delicate features. Her eyes were closed, her expression peaceful in suspended animation. The holographic interface activated again beside the pod, displaying information Mark couldn't read alongside vital signs he could intuitively understand, stable but weakening. "She's alive," Mark murmured, "but the stasis system is failing." The interface confirmed his assessment, adding a time estimate that translated to approximately 3 Earth months before complete system failure. How long has she been here? Mark wondered. The answer appeared as a numeric value that, when converted using the universal mathematical constants, equated to roughly 50 Earth years. 50 years in stasis, crashed on this barren rock, while her companions presumably perished in their pods as systems failed one by one. "This is incredible," Mark said, circling the pod. "A Viltrumite, or whatever her species is called, who escaped the Empire. Who rejected their ways." The holographic display shifted to show a star map, focusing on a distant region Mark didn't recognize. A new home? A colony of dissenters? The interface wasn't sophisticated enough to convey complex information without language compatibility. Mark considered his situation. He was stranded without transportation, being hunted by Viltrumites, with a critical mission incomplete. And now he discovered a survivor from a species related to his paternal heritage, someone who might have valuable information about Viltrumite weaknesses. If he could communicate with her. If he could safely revive her. If she didn't immediately see his partial Viltrumite DNA as a threat. Big ifs. The holographic interface interrupted his thoughts, displaying what appeared to be a distress signal, a beacon broadcasting the ship's location. The crash activated an automated distress call, Mark realized. "Is anyone coming to rescue you?" The system's response was ambiguous, possibly yes, eventually, but with no certainty. Mark made a decision. "Computer, or whatever you call yourself, can you detect Viltrumite vessels near this system?" The display shifted to show a tactical sensor readout. The pursuing ship that had chased the scout was now leaving the system, apparently believing Mark was aboard the fleeing Kryptonian vessel. "They took the bait," Mark said with relief. "But that still leaves me stranded here. Unless..." He studied the crashed ship more carefully. Despite the impact damage, many systems remained operational: life support, internal power, the stasis pod. Perhaps. "Is this ship's propulsion system reparable?" he asked the interface. "Could it fly again?" The system analyzed his request, displaying a damage assessment that Mark interpreted as, possibly, with significant repairs, but not quickly or easily. Not a viable solution for his immediate needs, then. What about communications? "Could you contact a Kryptonian vessel if I provided coordinates?" The affirmative response came with a qualification: limited range, degraded by the asteroid field's electromagnetic interference. Better than nothing, Mark decided. Let's try something. Using the universal mathematical constants as a foundation, Mark programmed a simple distress message including the scout's registry code and his coordinates, hoping the Kryptonian vessel's AI would recognize the signal and return for him. As the message began broadcasting, Mark returned to the stasis pod, studying its occupant with renewed interest. Here was someone who might understand both sides of his heritage, the Viltrumite strength and the moral choice to reject their brutality. "I wish I could wake you up," he said to the unconscious figure. "I bet you'd have some stories to tell. Maybe even some advice for a confused half-Viltrumite trying to save his planet from your former people." The interface beside the pod chimed, displaying what appeared to be revival protocols, procedures for safely bringing the occupant out of stasis. "That wasn't a request," Mark clarified hurriedly. "I don't have time to deal with a disoriented refugee right now. I have a mission, remember? A virus to find. Earth to save." The system seemed to understand, reverting to status monitoring mode. Mark sighed, leaning against a nearby console. He needed rest, needed to think. The oxygen in his EVA suit would last approximately 30 more hours, and the crashed ship's life support could sustain him indefinitely. He had shelter, safety for the moment, and a broadcasting distress signal. All he could do now was wait and hope that his message reached the scout, hope that the pursuing Viltrumites didn't return, hope that Earth could hold out long enough for him to complete his mission. Hope seemed in short supply these days. Debbie Grayson had never considered herself a particularly brave woman. Determined, yes. Stubborn, absolutely. But brave? That quality belonged to heroes like Superman, or even, she reluctantly admitted, to her ex-husband Nolan. Yet here she was, standing before the United Nations Security Council as they debated humanity's response to the Viltrumite invasion. "Mrs. Grayson," began the Secretary General, "we appreciate your willingness to address this body. Your unique perspective as the former wife of the Viltrumite known as Omni-Man may provide insights critical to our survival." Debbie straightened her shoulders, acutely aware of the global broadcast carrying her words to billions of frightened people worldwide. "Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I'll be direct, I lived with a Viltrumite for over a decade without knowing his true nature or purpose. I can't claim special knowledge of their tactics or weaknesses." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. They'd hoped for more. "However," she continued, "I do know something about their psychology, at least as it manifests in Nolan Grayson. And I believe that understanding may help us now." The Russian representative leaned forward. "Please elaborate, Mrs. Grayson." Debbie gathered her thoughts, choosing her words carefully. "Viltrumites value strength above all else. Physical strength, primarily, but also strength of will, of purpose. They respect power and despise what they perceive as weakness." "So we should demonstrate military might?" asked the American representative. "No," Debbie corrected. "We should demonstrate resilience. Determination. The very qualities they believe humans lack. Every time we evacuate a city before they can terrorize its population, every time we quickly restore services after their attacks, every time we refuse to panic or surrender, we challenge their fundamental assumption that we're inferior." The Chinese representative frowned. "This sounds like psychological warfare, Mrs. Grayson. The Viltrumites are destroying our cities with their bare hands. How does our resilience counter such power?" "It buys time," Debbie stated firmly. "Time for my son to return with a weapon that can defeat them." This revelation caused an immediate stir. Cecil Stedman, sitting beside Debbie, winced slightly. That information had been classified. "What weapon?" demanded several representatives simultaneously. Debbie met Cecil's gaze apologetically before addressing the council. "A biological agent developed by Kryptonian scientists specifically effective against Viltrumite physiology. Superman has sent my son to retrieve it from a distant outpost." "Your son?" The French representative's tone bordered on incredulous. "The half-Viltrumite teenager?" "Yes," Debbie confirmed, maternal pride evident in her voice. "Mark Grayson, who inherited his father's strength but was raised with human values. Who chose Earth over Viltrumite ideology without hesitation." She paused, surveying the skeptical faces around her. "You don't know my son," she continued. "But I do. And if anyone can bring back this weapon, it's Mark. Our job, humanity's job, is to ensure there's still a civilization here when he returns." Cecil took over, outlining the GDA's global defense strategy, concentrating resources on key infrastructure, utilizing specialized anti-Viltrumite weapons developed using technology from Nolan's captured ship, and coordinating evacuation protocols to minimize civilian casualties. As the briefing continued, Debbie's thoughts turned to Mark, somewhere in the vastness of space, carrying the weight of Earth's survival on his 17-year-old shoulders. And to Nolan, who had surprised her one last time by standing against his own people to protect their son. "Bring them both home," she prayed silently. "Somehow, bring them both home." Superman emerged from dimensional displacement to find the Fortress of Solitude in ruins. The Phantom Protocol had successfully trapped several Viltrumite warriors in dimensional suspension, but others had escaped, systematically destroying the structure's crystalline architecture. Weakened by the dimensional transition and his previous injuries, Superman surveyed the devastation grimly. 5 years of accumulated knowledge, Kryptonian technology, and defensive capabilities, reduced to glittering rubble across the Arctic ice. His communicator, miraculously still functional, activated immediately. Superman. Cecil's voice conveyed equal parts relief and urgency. Thank God. We thought you were, still alive, Superman confirmed, wincing as he assessed his injuries. Though the fortress is destroyed. What's the global situation? Cecil's hesitation spoke volumes. Critical. Viltrumite forces have established control over major population centers. Conventional military responses proved ineffective. We've fallen back to a containment strategy, evacuating civilians, preserving critical infrastructure. Casualties? High, Cecil admitted. In the hundreds of thousands globally. They're being selective in their destruction. Demonstrating power rather than attempting complete annihilation. Psychological warfare, Superman concluded. Breaking humanities will before the main force arrives. Exactly. We're countering with everything we have, but without you, we've been fighting a defensive battle. Superman launched himself skyward, heading toward GDA headquarters. I'm back now. And I'm done being defensive. Wait, Cecil cautioned. Before you launch a counteroffensive, there's something you should know. Nolan Grayson is alive, and he's been fighting against the Viltrumites. Superman nearly fell from the sky in shock. What? How is that possible? Multiple confirmed reports place him defending civilians in Chicago, New Delhi, and most recently, London. He's engaged Viltrumite forces directly, apparently opposing their invasion. It could be misdirection, Superman suggested, though he recalled Nolan's protection of Mark during their confrontation with Thrag. Perhaps, Cecil conceded. But his actions have saved thousands of lives. Whatever his motivation, he's currently an asset rather than an enemy. Superman processed this unexpected development. Where is he now? Unknown. He's been moving constantly, presumably to avoid Thrag and the other Viltrumite leadership. Speaking of which, Thrag has established a command center in what remains of New York. He's demanded Earth's formal surrender within 48 hours. Not going to happen, Superman stated flatly. I'm heading to New York. Superman, wait, Cecil urged. We need coordination, not a frontal assault. The anti-Viltrumite weapons we've developed show promise, but deployment requires precision. What kind of weapons? Cecil outlined the GDA's arsenal: sonic disruptors tuned to Viltrumite inner ear frequency, radiation emitters targeting specific weaknesses in their cellular structure, and most promisingly, nanite inhibitors designed to temporarily suppress their enhanced abilities. None are permanently effective, Cecil explained, but combined with your direct intervention, they could shift the balance temporarily. Enough to make a difference until Mark returns, Superman concluded. If he returns, Cecil said quietly. We've lost all contact with the scout. Long-range sensors detected what appeared to be an intercept by an unidentified vessel near the KR-2817 system. Superman's heart sank. If Mark had been captured or killed, Earth's best hope died with him. No. He refused to accept that outcome. Mark will complete his mission, Superman said with conviction. Our job is to ensure Earth survives until then. I'm proceeding to GDA headquarters for tactical coordination. As he flew, Superman allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The stakes had never been higher in his years as Earth's protector. Not just a city or country, but all of humanity hung in the balance. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, a teenager he'd come to care for deeply faced dangers Superman couldn't protect him from. Sometimes being a mentor meant letting go. Trusting that your teachings had prepared someone for challenges they must face alone. He just hoped those teachings had been enough. Mark awoke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the blue-tinged emergency lighting of the crashed alien vessel. He dozed off while waiting for a response to his distress signal, exhaustion finally overcoming anxiety. "Computer," he called to the ship's interface, "any response to our transmission?" The holographic display appeared, showing signal analysis. No response detected. Mark checked his suit's chronometer. 18 hours since he'd been stranded. 18 hours closer to Earth's confrontation with the Viltrumite Armada. He needed to move, to act, to do something. "Computer, I need transportation," he stated firmly. "Either my ship needs to find me, or I need another way to reach the Kryptonian outpost." The interface processed his request, displaying a series of options Mark interpreted as: continue waiting, attempt ship repairs, estimated completion, 47 days, or revive stasis occupant for additional assistance. None particularly appealing. Mark paced the cabin, frustration mounting. The occupant in stasis might have knowledge or abilities that could help, but revival carried significant risks: medical complications, language barriers, potentially hostile reaction to his Viltrumite heritage. His deliberation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's sensors. Something was approaching, fast. "Computer, identify approaching vessel." The display showed a familiar silhouette, his Kryptonian scout, returning on an intercept course. "Yes." Mark punched the air triumphantly. "It worked. My message got through." His celebration was short-lived. Additional sensor data revealed a second vessel in pursuit, the same Viltrumite ship that had chased him earlier. They followed the scout back, Mark realized. "I need to get out of here before they detect this crash site." He quickly gathered his EVA suit components, preparing for rapid departure. As he worked, his gaze fell on the stasis pod containing the blue-skinned female. "I can't just leave you here," he muttered. "If they find this ship." The Viltrumites had shown no mercy to dissenters during their purges. This survivor, preserved for 50 years, would likely be executed immediately if discovered. But he couldn't take her with him either. The scout was designed for a single occupant, and reviving her now, in the middle of a crisis, was impractical at best. "Computer," Mark addressed the interface urgently, "can you hide this ship's energy signature? Make it undetectable to Viltrumite sensors." The system confirmed this capability, already initiating power reduction protocols in response to the approaching threat. "Good," Mark nodded. "Keep her safe. Maybe someday, when this is all over." He didn't finish the thought. There might not be an all over if he failed his mission. Donning his helmet, Mark cycled through the airlock and launched himself toward the approaching scout, using his suit's propulsion to accelerate across the vacuum separating them. The scout had slowed, hovering above the dwarf planet's surface as its systems searched for Mark's life signs. The pursuing Viltrumite vessel remained at a distance, apparently analyzing the situation. Mark pushed his suit's propulsion to maximum, covering the remaining distance in minutes. The scout detected his approach, automatically opening its airlock to receive him. Once inside, he wasted no time. "Computer, maximum acceleration. Get us out of this system now." Warning, the scout's AI responded, "Pursuing vessel has locked weapon systems on our position. Evasive maneuvers." Mark ordered as he strapped himself into the pilot's seat. "Use the asteroid field for cover." The scout responded instantly, diving toward a dense cluster of asteroids as energy blasts from the Viltrumite vessel narrowly missed their stern. The ship's AI navigated the hazardous field with precision that made Mark's earlier manual attempt seem amateur by comparison. "Can we outrun them once we clear the asteroids?" Mark asked. "Negative," the computer replied. Pursuing vessel's propulsion capabilities exceed Scout-class specifications by approximately 23%. Not good news. They couldn't outrun their pursuers, couldn't outfight them, and every minute spent evading delayed his vital mission. Mark studied the tactical display, seeking options. The binary stars at the system's center generated intense radiation and gravitational forces, dangerous to navigate, but potentially useful. Computer, plot a course directly between the binary stars, he instructed. Calculate minimum safe distance for our shields while maximizing disruption to pursuing vessel. Warning, such a course carries significant risk. Shield failure probability, 38%. Do it anyway, Mark ordered. And prepare for immediate faster-than-light jump once we clear the stellar corona. The scout altered course, accelerating toward the massive binary stars. Behind them, the Viltrumite vessel adjusted to match their trajectory, maintaining pursuit but at a more cautious distance. As they approached the stars, the cabin temperature rose despite the ship's environmental controls. Warning indicators flashed across the console, radiation levels climbing, shields operating beyond recommended parameters. Shield failure imminent, the computer warned. Pursuing vessel maintaining distance but sustaining similar stress patterns. Hold course, Mark insisted, watching as the space between the binary stars grew in the viewscreen, a churning maelstrom of superheated plasma and gravitational shear. The scout shuddered violently as they entered the stellar corridor, alarms blaring throughout the cabin. Behind them, the Viltrumite vessel hesitated momentarily before continuing pursuit, though at greater distance. They're not giving up, Mark noted grimly. How much longer until we clear the stellar field? Approximately 47 seconds at current velocity, the computer responded. Shield integrity at 27% and falling. Prepare for blind jump the instant we clear the stars, Mark ordered. Any direction, maximum distance. Blind jumps are not recommended protocol, just do it. Mark shouted as another violent shudder rocked the scout. We don't have time to argue. The final seconds of their stellar transit seemed to stretch eternally, the scout systems failing in cascading sequence as radiation penetrated the weakening shields. Mark's Viltrumite physiology provided some protection against the increased radiation, but even he felt the effects, nausea, dizziness, skin burning despite the cabin's environmental controls. Stellar transit complete, the computer announced finally. Initiating blind faster-than-light jump in 3, 2, 1. The stars streaked and blurred as the scout lurched into faster-than-light travel. On the tactical display, the pursuing vessel appeared to hesitate at the stellar boundary, perhaps assessing damage before attempting to follow. Status of pursuing vessel? Mark asked once his stomach settled from the violent transition. Unknown. Sensor capabilities significantly degraded by radiation exposure. Mark slumped in his seat, allowing himself a moment of relief. They'd escaped, at least temporarily. Damage report? The computer displayed a schematic of the scout, sections highlighted in warning colors. Primary propulsion at 73% efficiency. Shield generators offline. Life support operating at reduced capacity. Navigation systems functional but degraded. Overall operational capability, 61% of standard parameters. Can we still reach the Kryptonian outpost? Affirmative, though estimated arrival time has increased by 17 hours due to reduced propulsion efficiency. 17 hours. Nearly a full day added to his mission timeline. Earth couldn't afford such delays, but there was nothing to be done about it now. Set course for the outpost, Mark instructed. And initiate whatever repairs can be performed en route. As the scout adjusted its trajectory, Mark turned his thoughts to Earth. How much of the planet remained under human control? Was Superman successfully leading the resistance? Had his father survived his confrontation with Thrag? And his mother, was she safe in whatever bunker the GDA had hidden her in? So many questions with no answers. Just the vast emptiness of space, a damaged ship, and a mission that grew more desperate by the hour. Computer, Mark said quietly, tell me more about the Scourge virus. How is it deployed? How quickly does it work? The Scourge virus is typically dispersed as an aerosol compound, the computer explained. Upon exposure, Viltrumite subjects experience symptoms within 1 to 4 hours, beginning with respiratory distress and progressing to systemic organ failure as the virus attacks their unique cellular structure. And there's no cure. No treatment. Kryptonian records indicate Viltrumite attempts to develop countermeasures were unsuccessful. The virus targets genetic sequences fundamental to their enhanced physiology, sequences that cannot be altered without compromising the abilities that define their species. Mark absorbed this soberly. He was planning to retrieve a weapon of mass destruction specifically designed to kill beings who shared half his DNA. Beings like his father. What about partial Viltrumite genetics? He asked again. Someone like me? As previously stated, insufficient data exists regarding half Viltrumite subjects. Theoretical models suggest reduced susceptibility, but without clinical studies, no definitive prediction can be made. In other words, he might be delivering his own death sentence along with Earth's salvation. But what choice did he have? Earth, his mother, his friends, billions of innocent humans, faced annihilation or subjugation. The moral calculus seemed clear, even if the personal cost remained uncertain. How long until we reach the outpost? He asked. Current estimated arrival, 41 hours, 23 minutes. Nearly 2 days. Plus the return journey, if the ship's damaged systems could manage it. Mark closed his eyes, exhaustion and radiation exposure taking their toll. Wake me if anything changes. I need to rest. As he drifted into uneasy sleep, his dreams filled with images of Earth under siege, his mother in danger, his father battling Viltrumite forces, and a blue-skinned woman frozen in time on a distant, forgotten world. The battle for London raged across the city's skyline. 3 Viltrumite warriors methodically destroyed landmarks, Tower Bridge crumbling, the Houses of Parliament in flames, Buckingham Palace reduced to rubble. British military forces had withdrawn to the outskirts, their conventional weapons proving useless against the invaders. Civilian evacuation continued underground through the extensive subway system, guided by emergency personnel. Above it all, a streak of blue and red engaged the lead Viltrumite in aerial combat so intense it created sonic booms that shattered windows for miles around. Superman had been fighting continuously for nearly 48 hours, moving from city to city as Viltrumite attacks spread globally. His costume was torn, his cape in tatters, blood staining his iconic S symbol. But he fought on, drawing Viltrumite attention to himself, away from evacuating civilians. Your resistance is admirable, commented his current opponent, a female warrior with short-cropped hair and a facial scar that suggested she'd survived serious combat in the past. But ultimately pointless. Superman dodged her punch, countering with a blast of freeze breath that momentarily disoriented her. If it's so pointless, why are you working so hard to stop me? Their battle carried them through the smoke-filled sky, each impact creating shockwaves that distorted the air around them. Superman was tiring, his solar energy reserves depleted by constant combat without opportunity to recharge. The Viltrumite noticed his fatigue, pressing her advantage with increasingly aggressive attacks. Thrag was right about you, she observed, landing a blow that sent Superman crashing into what remained of St. Paul's Cathedral. Impressive, but limited. Superman pulled himself from the rubble, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. Before he could launch a counterattack, a blur of white and blue slammed into his opponent from above, driving her into the ground with catastrophic force. Nolan Grayson hovered above the impact crater, his Viltrumite uniform torn and bloodied but his bearing still commanding. You look terrible, Nolan observed as Superman rejoined him in the air. Speak for yourself, Superman replied, noting the various wounds evident on Nolan's body. Below, the female Viltrumite burst from the crater, rage distorting her features. Traitor, she snarled at Nolan. The Emperor will have your head. He's welcome to try, Nolan replied coldly. He'll be joining you in defeat. She launched herself at them, but this time faced both Superman and Nolan together. The combined force of their coordinated attack overwhelmed her defenses, ending with Nolan's brutal finishing strike that left her unconscious in the ruins of Trafalgar Square. "We need to move," Nolan stated, already scanning the horizon where the other two Viltrumites had noticed their comrades' defeat. "More will come." Superman hesitated, years of distrust warring with tactical necessity. "Why are you helping us, Nolan? Why turn against your own people?" Nolan's expression remained unreadable. "We don't have time for this conversation." "Make time," Superman insisted. "If we're fighting together, I need to know your motivations." Nolan sighed, his gaze tracking the approaching Viltrumites. "The Empire isn't what it once was. What it was meant to be. Thrag's leadership has corrupted our purpose, turned strength into mere brutality." "That sounds like a political disagreement, not a reason to protect humans," Superman pressed. "Mark is here," Nolan said simply. "Debbie is here. After living among humans for so long, I find I prefer your civilization's potential to what the Empire has become." It wasn't a complete explanation. Superman sensed layers of unspoken complexity behind Nolan's words, but it would have to suffice for now. "The GDA has developed weapons that can temporarily neutralize Viltrumite abilities," Superman informed him. "If we coordinate with their deployment teams." "I'm aware," Nolan interrupted. "Where do you think I've been getting intelligence on attack patterns? Cecil Stedman and I have established a working relationship." Superman blinked in surprise. "Cecil didn't mention that." "Stedman plays his cards close," Nolan observed dryly. "Now, are we continuing this conversation while my former colleagues regroup, or are we moving to the next priority target?" Superman made a quick decision. "GDA intelligence suggests Moscow is next on the Viltrumite systematic destruction pattern." Nolan nodded. "Moscow it is." As they accelerated eastward, Superman communicated with Cecil, confirming Nolan's unexpected alliance and coordinating deployment of anti-Viltrumite weapons to coincide with their arrival in Russia. "How's Debbie?" Nolan asked as they flew, his tone carefully neutral. "Worried about Mark," Superman answered honestly. "But strong. She's been helping coordinate civilian responses, using her knowledge of Viltrumite psychology to develop counter-strategies." A flicker of what might have been pride crossed Nolan's features. "She always was adaptable." "And Mark? Any word from his mission?" "Nothing since his ship was tracked to the KR-2817 system," Superman admitted. "We lost contact after that." Nolan processed this grimly. If Thrag deployed pursuit vessels, Mark could be in serious danger. "The boy has heart, but minimal experience." "He's resourceful," Superman countered. "And more importantly, he understands what's at stake." They flew in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts as the European continent passed below. "The Scourge virus," Nolan said finally, "if Mark retrieves it successfully, you understand what deploying it will mean." "I do," Superman confirmed solemnly. "It won't distinguish between Viltrumite warriors and others with Viltrumite DNA. The implication hung in the air between them. "You're concerned about yourself," Superman realized. "And Mark. Mark should be safe, his human DNA provides sufficient genetic variance," Nolan stated, though Superman detected uncertainty in his tone. "My concern is more practical." "Meaning?" "Meaning that if we deploy a weapon capable of eliminating all pure Viltrumites on Earth, Thrag will respond with maximum force. The entire armada, every weapon in their arsenal, they'll destroy this planet rather than allow such a threat to spread." Superman hadn't considered this consequence. "Then we need a targeted deployment. Something that eliminates the invasion force without threatening the Empire as a whole." "Precisely," Nolan agreed. "Which means we need to locate and secure their command ship before Mark returns. All Viltrumite vessels are equipped with biohazard containment protocols, legacies from their first encounter with the Scourge. If we can isolate the virus deployment to Earth's atmosphere without it reaching their fleet, they might retreat rather than risk wider contamination," Superman finished, understanding the strategy. It's our best hope for minimizing casualties. On both sides, Nolan confirmed. Superman studied his former enemy, now apparent ally, with new perspective. Despite everything, Nolan was trying to find a solution that preserved both his birth world and his adopted one. Perhaps people could change, even Viltrumites. First Moscow, Superman decided, then we find Thrag's command ship. The Kryptonian outpost hung in space before the Scout, a structure both familiar and alien to Mark's eyes. Built from the same crystalline architecture as Superman's fortress, but larger, more elaborate, a small artificial moon orbiting a distant star. Life support systems active, reported the Scout's computer. Minimal power signatures detected. Automated maintenance protocols appear operational. Any signs of Viltrumite presence? Mark asked, scanning the sensor readouts. Negative. No vessels detected within sensor range. Small mercies. After the pursuit and damage sustained during their escape, Mark had half expected to find the outpost already under Viltrumite control. Initiate docking procedures, he instructed. And prepare the EVA suit as a precaution. The Scout approached cautiously, its damaged system struggling to maintain optimal function after the radiation exposure. As they neared the outpost's docking bay, automated systems activated, guiding the vessel into a crystalline berth designed for Kryptonian ships. Docking complete, the computer announced. Outpost atmosphere analysis indicates breathable composition, though stale from prolonged recycling. Mark donned the EVA suit anyway, unwilling to take unnecessary risks when so close to his objective. Computer, can you interface with the outpost systems? Locate the secure containment area where the virus would be stored. Attempting connection, the computer responded. After several tense moments, connection established. Outpost central database accessible. Searching for containment protocols, located. Biohazard storage facility located in Section Delta, Sublevel 3. Download station schematics to my suit's display, Mark requested. And maintain the Scout in ready status for immediate departure. The airlock cycled open, allowing Mark to step from the Scout into the outpost's docking bay. The artificial gravity activated automatically, adjusting to approximate Earth normal. Emergency lighting cast blue-white illumination across the crystalline surfaces, creating an ethereal quality to the abandoned station. Following his suit's display, Mark navigated through silent corridors, passing laboratories and living quarters long abandoned. Occasional personal items remained, a data crystal here, a decorative object there, subtle reminders of the Kryptonian scientists who had staffed this facility before their homeworld's destruction. Superman's people. An advanced civilization reduced to a single survivor and scattered outposts like this one, preserved in the vacuum of space. Just like the Kryptonians, Earth will survive, Mark promised himself. One way or another. The biohazard storage facility was secured behind multiple airlocks and decontamination chambers, each requiring authentication that the Scout's computer had fortunately extracted from the main database. As the final door slid open, Mark entered a circular chamber with a central pedestal surrounded by monitoring equipment. On the pedestal sat a single crystalline container, approximately the size of a shoebox, glowing with a faint greenish light. That's it? Mark murmured, approaching carefully. Looks so ordinary for something so deadly. His suit's sensors analyzed the container, confirming its contents matched the molecular signature of the Scourge virus as recorded in Kryptonian databases. I found it, he breathed, relief washing through him. Now I just need to get it back to Earth. He reached for the container, then hesitated. What if the container was booby-trapped? What if removing it triggered security protocols? Computer, he subvocalized to his suit's communication system, any security measures protecting the virus container? Analyzing, container appears secured by standard Kryptonian biohazard protocols. Removal requires authentication but triggers no apparent defensive systems. Mark approached the console beside the pedestal, interfacing his suit with the Kryptonian technology. The Scout's computer remotely provided the necessary authentication codes, and with a soft chime, the container's security field deactivated. Carefully, Mark lifted the crystalline box from its pedestal. It was surprisingly light, almost weightless, the greenish glow pulsing gently against his gloved hands. Containment integrity confirmed, his suit reported. No leakage detected. Then let's get out of here, Mark said, securing the container in a specialized compartment of his EVA suit. Computer, fastest course back to Earth. Calculating. With current damage to propulsion systems, estimated return journey, 78 hours. 3 days. Plus the 2 days already spent reaching the outpost. Earth would face the full Viltrumite armada before he could return. What about emergency protocols? Any way to boost engine efficiency? Reduce travel time? One potential option exists, the computer replied. Emergency overload of propulsion matrix could reduce journey to approximately 54 hours. However, system failure probability exceeds 70%, with catastrophic failure possible. In other words, we might explode mid-journey, Mark translated grimly. What's plan B? Before the computer could respond, alarms blared throughout the outpost. The lighting shifted to pulsing red, and security bulkheads began closing throughout the facility. Warning, announced the outpost's automated system. Unauthorized vessels approaching. Viltrumite energy signatures detected. Initiating lockdown protocols. Mark's heart sank. How? How did they find us? Unknown, the scout's computer responded. Possibly tracking technology beyond Kryptonian detection capabilities. Whatever the method, the result was the same. Mark was trapped in the outpost with the virus while Viltrumite forces closed in. Computer, what defensive capabilities does this outpost have? Limited. Primary defenses designed for meteoroid deflection and radiation protection, not military engagement. Estimated time until Viltrumite vessels achieve docking capability, 12 minutes. 12 minutes to figure out an escape plan. Mark ran through options rapidly, none promising. He couldn't outfight multiple Viltrumite warriors. Couldn't outrun them in the damaged scout. Couldn't hide in the limited confines of the outpost. Which left? Computer, does this outpost have any other ships besides docking berths? Escape pods? Anything? Searching outpost inventory, one experimental prototype vessel detected in research hangar beta. Designation, Phantom Drive Testbed. Phantom Drive? What's that? Experimental Kryptonian propulsion system utilizing controlled dimensional phasing. Status, prototype, untested for organic passengers. An untested experimental drive sounded risky, but with Viltrumite ships minutes away, risk was relative. Location of research hangar beta. The suit's display updated with a new route, highlighting a path through the facility to a secondary hangar area. Mark moved quickly, navigating through closing security bulkheads, using his Viltrumite strength when necessary to force paths through sealed sections. Behind him, the outpost sensors tracked the approaching vessels, now less than 8 minutes from docking. Research hangar beta was smaller than the main docking area, clearly designed for experimental rather than practical craft. In its center sat a vessel unlike any Mark had seen before, sleeker than the Scout, with an almost predatory design aesthetic, its hull composed of overlapping crystalline plates that seemed to shift subtly even as he watched. "Is that the Phantom Drive ship?" he asked, approaching cautiously. "Affirmative. Prototype designate Wraith. Designed for rapid transit between dimensional boundaries. Can you interface with it? Get it operational? Attempting connection, connection established. Onboard systems activating. Warning, vessel operational parameters incomplete. Test flights limited to unmanned drones. No organic subject testing recorded." "Well, I'm about to set a record then," Mark muttered, approaching the ship's entry hatch as it opened in response to the computer's commands. The interior was surprisingly minimalist, a single pilot's chair surrounded by crystalline control surfaces, with no apparent conventional propulsion systems visible. How does this thing work? Mark asked, settling into the chair as the hatch sealed behind him. Phantom drive creates controlled tiers in space-time fabric, allowing vessel to partially phase between dimensions while maintaining physical integrity. Theoretical velocity, beyond conventional faster-than-light limitations. And the risks? Numerous and severe, the computer replied bluntly. Dimensional displacement of organic tissue. Temporal desynchronization. Complete molecular dispersal. So I might arrive at Earth as a puddle of goo, in the wrong century, or not at all, Mark summarized. Fantastic. The outpost's alarm system intensified, indicating Viltrumite vessels had begun docking procedures. Time had run out. Computer, transfer all navigation data to the Wraith. Set coordinates for Earth, specifically the Arctic location of Superman's fortress. Transfer complete. Warning, Viltrumite forces have breached outer security perimeters. Estimated time until they reach this location, 3 minutes, 42 seconds. Mark secured the virus container to a storage compartment in the Wraith, then strapped himself into the pilot's chair. The ship hummed to life around him, control surfaces illuminating with Kryptonian symbols he couldn't read. Computer, can you pilot this thing remotely? Or do I need to figure out these controls? Limited remote guidance possible. Primary dimensional phase initiation requires direct pilot confirmation due to safety protocols. Of course it does, Mark sighed. Which control activates the drive? A particular crystal illuminated on the console before him, a pulsing red hexagon that practically screamed, "Do not touch unless desperate." Mark was definitely desperate. Warning, the computer announced, Viltrumite life signs detected in adjacent section. Breach of research hangar imminent. Remote guidance activated. Mark confirmed, hand hovering over the phase control. Affirmative. Coordinates locked. Emergency protocols overriding safety interlocks. Through the Wraith's transparent canopy, Mark saw the hangar door beginning to buckle as something, or someone, applied tremendous force from the other side. Here goes everything, he whispered, and pressed the crystal. Reality shifted. One moment, Mark sat in the Wraith as Viltrumite warriors burst through the hangar door, the next, the entire universe seemed to fold around him, colors inverting, physical sensations stretching and compressing simultaneously. He might have screamed, but sound had no meaning in whatever not space the Wraith now occupied. Time lost all reference points, seconds might have been hours, minutes might have been days. Then, with a sensation like being turned inside out and back again, reality reasserted itself. The Wraith shuddered violently, alarms blaring from every system as the dimensional phase collapsed. Through the canopy, Mark saw not the crystalline structures of the Kryptonian outpost, nor the familiar Arctic landscape of Superman's fortress. Instead, the blue-white curve of Earth filled his view, beautiful, fragile, and surrounded by hundreds of Viltrumite warships. The Armada had arrived. "They're here," Superman announced, his enhanced vision detecting what orbital monitoring systems soon confirmed, a massive fleet of Viltrumite vessels entering Earth's solar system, decelerating as they approached the planet. Beside him, Nolan Grayson studied the tactical display in the GDA's command center. Sooner than expected. Thrag must have accelerated their timeline after the first engagement. Cecil Stedman activated global communications channels. All defense grids to maximum alert. Evacuation protocols Charlie threw Echo in effect immediately. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as military and civilian authorities worldwide implemented emergency procedures developed during the days since the initial Viltrumite attacks. "We're not ready," Superman stated grimly. "The anti-Viltrumite weapons are deployed, but without the virus, we can only slow them, not stop them." "And Mark?" Debbie Grayson asked from her position at the communications console, where she'd been coordinating civilian evacuation strategies. "Any sign of his return?" Cecil shook his head. "Nothing on our long-range sensors. If he's approaching, he's either using stealth systems or taking an indirect route. Or he didn't make it," Nolan said what no one else would voice. We need to prepare for that possibility. Debbie's glare could have melted steel. My son is alive. And he'll be here. I hope you're right, Nolan replied softly. But hope isn't strategy. What is our strategy? Asked the Joint Chiefs representative. With all due respect, we're facing an armada of beings who can each bench press a battleship. Even with Superman and, him, nodding toward Nolan, we're severely outmatched. We fight smart, Cecil answered. Use the weapons we have to maximum effect. Target their command structure. Create conditions where retreat becomes more logical than continued engagement. And if that fails, the representative pressed. Cecil's expression hardened. Then we make conquering Earth so costly they'll remember it for generations. Satellite imagery appeared on the main display, showing the Viltrumite fleet arranging itself in precise formation, a massive ring of warships surrounding smaller vessels, with one significantly larger ship at the center. That's Thrag's command vessel, Nolan identified. The Imperial Fist. From there, he coordinates the entire invasion force. Then that's our primary target, Superman decided. You can't be serious, Cecil objected. That ship will be the most heavily defended point in the entire fleet. Attempting to breach it would be suicide. Not necessarily, Nolan countered, studying the formation. Thrag's arrogance works against him. He'll expect a defensive response, not an offensive strike against his command center. Even so, the two of you against an entire command ship of Viltrumite warriors, not just the two of us, Superman interrupted. Your anti-Viltrumite weapons. If we can deliver them directly to the command ship, a Trojan horse, Debbie realized. Deliver the weapons inside their defenses. Nolan looked at his ex-wife with newfound respect. Exactly. But we'd need a delivery method they wouldn't immediately destroy. A surrender delegation, Superman suggested. Official representatives of Earth, coming to negotiate terms. Cecil caught on immediately. With the weapons concealed in diplomatic containers protected by international law. Even Viltrumites might respect symbolic protocols during a formal surrender. They won't, Nolan corrected. But they will be curious. Thrag's ego will demand he receive Earth's surrender personally. The plan took shape rapidly, a small delegation including Superman, ostensibly coming to discuss surrender terms, would be transported to the Imperial Fist. Once aboard, they would deploy the anti-Viltrumite weapons at key points, creating chaos while Superman and Nolan attempted to neutralize Thrag himself. It won't stop the invasion, Nolan cautioned. But removing Thrag from command could create enough confusion to buy time. Time for Mark to return, Debbie added firmly, refusing to consider alternatives. As preparations began, Superman pulled Nolan aside. You know Thrag better than anyone. Can we defeat him? Both of us together. Nolan's expression was grim. Thrag isn't just another Viltrumite. He's the Empire's strongest warrior, bred and trained for leadership through combat. I've seen him kill a dozen elite warriors without breaking a sweat. That's not an answer. No, Nolan admitted. The honest answer is I don't know. But I do know we have to try. Superman nodded, accepting the reality of their situation. For Earth. For Mark and Debbie, Nolan corrected quietly. And yes, for Earth. Mark's situation had gone from desperate to catastrophic. The Wraith, damaged by the dimensional transition, drifted in high Earth orbit, most systems offline or malfunctioning. Through the canopy, he could see the Viltrumite armada deploying around the planet, hundreds of warships positioning themselves strategically. He'd arrived exactly where he needed to be, but with no way to deliver his critical cargo safely to Earth's surface. Computer, damage report, he called, hoping the scout's AI was still connected to the experimental ship. No response. The interface between the scout's computer and the Wraith had apparently failed during the dimensional jump. Great, Mark muttered. Stranded in orbit with the one weapon that could save Earth, watching the invasion I'm supposed to stop, with no way to communicate or land. The virus container remained secure in its compartment, the greenish glow pulsing steadily. So close, yet completely useless unless he could deliver it to Earth's defenders. Mark assessed his options. The Wraith's propulsion was offline, but perhaps its communication system still functioned. If he could send a message to the GDA, to Superman, to anyone, they might be able to retrieve him. He examined the crystalline control surfaces, trying to identify anything resembling a communication system. Without the computer's guidance, the Kryptonian controls were indecipherable. As he worked, a shadow fell across the Wraith. Looking up, Mark froze as he saw a Viltrumite scout vessel approaching his position, clearly having detected the dimensional disturbance of his arrival. Perfect timing, he groaned, desperately searching for any functioning weapon systems. There were none. The Wraith was a research vessel, not a fighter. The scout vessel maneuvered alongside the Wraith, close enough for Mark to see Viltrumite soldiers examining his ship through viewport. Moments later, energy beams lanced out, attaching to the Wraith's hull, tractor beams, pulling the disabled vessel toward what appeared to be a docking bay. Mark had seconds to make a decision. Stay with the ship and be captured, or... His gaze fell on his EVA suit, still partially assembled nearby. It had limited propulsion, not enough to reach Earth from orbit, but perhaps enough to reach another vessel. One not controlled by Viltrumites. With a final glance at the virus container, Mark made the hardest choice of his life. He couldn't risk the virus falling into Viltrumite hands. Couldn't risk being captured with it. His only hope was to escape, find another way to reach Earth, and return for the container before the Viltrumites discovered its contents. Moving quickly, he donned the EVA suit and secured the helmet. The suit's systems activated, confirming breathable atmosphere and functional propulsion, approximately 20 minutes worth at maximum thrust. Not much, but it would have to do. The Wraith's emergency hatch controls still functioned manually. Mark positioned himself, took a deep breath, and pulled the release lever. Explosive decompression blasted him away from the Wraith, the sudden vacuum sending him tumbling into space. He fought to stabilize his position, using the suit's propulsion to halt his spin and orient himself. The Viltrumite scout vessel adjusted position, clearly confused by the unexpected ejection of a suited figure from their capture target. Mark used their momentary hesitation to activate maximum thrust, propelling himself away from both the Wraith and the scout vessel, toward the distant blue curve of Earth. He knew he couldn't reach the surface, the math was impossible. But he could potentially reach lower orbit, perhaps close enough for Superman to detect him with enhanced senses, if he was looking in the right direction at the right time. A desperate plan with minimal chance of success. But as his father had once told him during a rare moment of genuine mentorship, sometimes victory isn't about perfect strategy, but refusing to accept defeat. Behind him, the Viltrumite vessel had overcome its surprise and now moved to pursue. Mark pushed his suit's propulsion beyond safety parameters, creating erratic course changes to make targeting difficult. As he neared Earth's upper atmosphere, warnings flashed across his helmet display: propulsion nearly depleted, oxygen reserves at 62%, external temperature rising as atmospheric friction increased. The Viltrumite scout had closed half the distance, now clearly visible whenever Mark glanced back. He had minutes, perhaps seconds, before they caught him. Then something unexpected happened. The pursuing vessel suddenly changed course, responding to what appeared to be a priority signal from the fleet. Within moments, it had abandoned the chase, returning to formation with the armada. What the hell? Mark wondered aloud, not questioning his good fortune but deeply suspicious of its timing. The answer became apparent as a new vessel appeared on his suit's rudimentary sensors. A small craft. Something went wrong with this response, please try again. Move directly to the next chapter. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.